Thank you.
Sorry, I cut you off guard.
You were quick. Mayor Stewart in the chair, Councillor Carr, Councillor DeGenova, not in the chamber, Councillor Fry, Councillor Swanson, Councillor Hardwick, not in the chamber, Councillor Wiebe, Councillor Boyle, Councillor Dominato, not in the chamber, Councillor Bly, Councillor Kirby-Young, not in the chamber. You have quorum.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Clerk. And we first acknowledge we're on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, and thank them for having cared for this land, and look forward to working with them as we build this great city together. And of course, we have awesome staff here at the City of Vancouver, as we all know, but it's worth pointing it out time and time again. So thanks for all their service. In order to avoid procedural uncertainties which arose at previous public hearings due to a loss of quorum while in committee of the whole, the City Clerk has advised that while Council is required under Section 18.13 of the Procedure Bylaw to move a motion to go into Committee of the Whole at a public hearing, it is not required to sit as a Committee of the Whole during the hearing. Therefore, it is their advice that the motion go into the Committee of the Whole be put to a vote and failed by Council. So would someone like to move a motion to go into the Committee of the Whole, please? Thank you, Councillor Bly. Councillor Boyle seconds it. Thanks very much. And again, we'd like this to fail. So all in favor? Seeing none. Those opposed? Hooray. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's failed. Okay, thanks very much. Motion failed. I think it's failed unanimously from what I saw. So Clerk, you can record the names there. Before we begin, I have some announcements. Speakers will have 5 minutes to make their comments and should limit their comments to the merits of the report being considered. Speakers should also state whether they are in support or oppose the recommendations. Speakers may speak only once. Any additional comments can be submitted in writing to publichearing@vancouver.ca. That's publichearing@vancouver.ca. Those speaking on behalf of 3 or more persons or 3 or more organizations will have up to 8 minutes to speak. The persons or representative of the organizations must also be identified for the record and be present and must not be speakers themselves. Finally, if Council does not conclude hearing from all speakers this evening, we will recess and reconvene the meeting on Thursday, July 11th at 6 p.m. here in the Council chamber. So let's start with the first one. The Clerk will now read the application and summary of correspondence received for zoning and development bylaw guidelines.
This is an application by the General Manager of Planning, Urban Design and Sustainability to amend the RT5 and RT5N, RT6, RTM3, RM8, RM8A, RM8N, and RM8AN, RM12N, FC2, HA1, and HA1A district schedules, and amend Section 9.25 of the sign bylaw to correct inadvertent errors and omissions. No correspondence has been received on this application since referral to public hearing.
Great, thanks very much. We have Haley Hoyka, planner, citywide and regional planning, here to present the application. Did you want to present or waive? Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from council to staff? I don't see anybody on the queue. And we don't have anybody who would like to hear from the public, I guess. Is there anybody you'd like to speak from the public to this? I think we have to go to the 3 times thing, right? So that's once. Anybody to speak from the public? Going twice. And a 3rd time. Thanks very much. So there are no speakers. The speakers list is now closed. As few or no public comments were received on this item after 5 p.m. today, I suggest we close the receipt of the public comments and move on to hearing closing comments, asking further questions of staff. So staff have any closing comments? You have any closing comments, staff? No?
Oh, sorry, no.
Okay, that's you. Yeah, okay. Council will now make its decision on this application. Oh, okay. I had her on the list. So, Councillor DeGenova, but seconded by Councillor Carr. Okay, thanks very much. And is there any debate on this? Don't see any debate. Okay, thanks very much. So we'll vote on this. Vote on screen. Just Councillor Hardwick is absent, so that has passed unanimously. Thanks very much. Okay, on to number 2, heritage designation for West 2nd Avenue. Clerk, can you go ahead?
This is an application by the General Manager of Planning, Urban Design, and Sustainability to designate as protected heritage property the exterior of the existing building at 4727 West 2nd Avenue, known as the Edith and Pat McGeer Residence, which is listed on the Vancouver Heritage Register in the A evaluation category. Since referral to public hearing, Council has received one piece of correspondence in support of the application. This represents all correspondence received up to approximately 4 p.m. today.
Great, thank you very much. And we have Maxine Schlager from the she's a heritage planner, planning urban design and sustainability. And did you want to go ahead with the presentation or waive the presentation?
I'll waive if that's council's wish.
Thank you very much. So any questions from council to staff? Just put yourself on the list if you have any questions. Okay, thanks. So now we're going to hear from the public. Are there any speakers in the audience who'd like to speak to this item? And I'm obliged to call 3 times, so I'll call it a second time. And one last time, third time. Thanks very much then. So seeing there are no speakers, the speakers list is now closed. As there were a few public comments were received on this item after 5 p.m., I suggest we now close the receipt of public comments and move on to hearing closing comments. So does staff have any closing comments?
No further comments.
Okay, thanks very much. Council have any questions for staff? Councillor Hardwick? That's going to reset your timer there. Please go ahead.
Hi there.
Oh, hi.
Hi. I'm just curious, the doctors McGeer, were they involved in the application? And since it's going to have heritage designation, will there be a plaque? Or could you just describe, I know we passed on having that presentation, but just a quick snapshot on how this came about?
They approached the city about designating their house. It actually wasn't even on the register. And they said, we have this nice old house. Can you evaluate it and possibly protect it so that it can't be demolished in the future?
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks very much. I don't see anybody else on the list. So I'll need a mover. Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young. Thank you, Councillor Carr. And so is there any debate, Council? And if there is, just put yourself on the list. And okay, let's get situated here. So I don't see anybody on the list, then I'll call the vote. Great, that's unanimous. Thanks very much, Council. So we'll move to the third item on the agenda, 1462 Granville Street. Clerk, you'd be so kind.
This is an application by House Street Ventures West Bank Projects Corporation to amend CD1 District 579 for 1462 Granville Street to add manufacturing, brewing, or distillery as an allowable use limited to 650 square meters. Since referral to public hearing, Council has received 8 pieces of correspondence in support of the application, 3 pieces of correspondence in opposition to the application, and one piece of correspondence dealing with other aspects of the application. This represents all correspondence received up to approximately 4 p.m. today.
Great, thanks very much. And we have Lex Dominiacs.
Yeah, thank you.
Dominiacs, thanks. Rezoning planner here. We're just wondering, did you want to present or waive the presentation?
I'm happy to waive, but can answer any questions.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. So we'll take up your kind offer there. And is the applicant team here to speak to the application? Did you want to speak, or did you want to waive your, or just questions maybe, if there's any questions? Thanks very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Dejanova, have you on the list? No.
No.
Any questions from any others? Councilors? Okay, so we'll go to the public, and I don't think there's anybody on this. No, so we have no speakers registered, so I'll make a call. Would anybody like to speak to this item? 1462 Granville Street, going once. Going twice. Okay, 3 times. Thanks very much. So seeing there are no speakers, speakers list is now closed. As we had few or no public comments after 5 p.m. today, we'll close the list now and move on to hearing closing comments and asking any future further questions. Does the applicant have any closing comments? Oh, staff have any closing comments?
Nope.
Right, I'm just going to ask first if there's any questions for staff from council or the applicant. I don't see any, so I have Councillor DeGenova move the motion.
Happy to move the motion, and seeing that we have many speakers to other items as well.
Okay, thanks.
I appreciate council waiving the presentation so we can get to some of those speakers tonight.
Thanks very much. And we have a seconder for this one? Okay, Councillor Carr, thank you very much. Is there any debate, council? I don't see any. Okay, so we'll move to the vote then. Waiting for Councillor Fry. Little bot thing. Would you like assisted vote? Okay, thanks. Oh, I don't know. We're losing people. I think it was all in favor is what I saw there. There we go. Okay, thanks. That's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're on rezoning for 1166 West Pender Street.
This is an application by Hari Pantari Architects to rezone 1166 West Pender Street from Downtown District to CD1 District to permit the development of a 32-story office building. A height of 120 meters and an FSR of 19.4 are proposed. Since referral to public hearing, Council has received 20 pieces of correspondence in support of the application, 9 pieces of correspondence in opposition to the application. Oh, shoot, sorry.
Is that it?
And a number of no correspondence dealing with other aspects of the application. This represents all correspondence received up to approximately 4 p.m. today.
Great, thanks very much for that. So we have Teen Fan, the rezoning planner from Urban Design and Sustainability here to present. And I think perhaps since there are a number of speakers, it'd be good for council to, unless you feel like we should waive the application or the presentation.
Waive the application. I'm happy to present and I have a presentation ready.
Okay, great.
Great, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Is it possible just to dim the lights
Yes.
a little bit?
It is possible. There we go. Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Teen Fan, rezoning planner for this application at 1166 West Pender Street. This is an application brought to you by Reliance Properties to allow for a commercial office tower in downtown Vancouver. This project provides a number of benefits, including the creation of new job space to close the deficiency in office space in the downtown area, improving the public realm, and offers a cash contribution towards affordable housing and childcare. This application proposes a 32-story office tower at 393 feet, which would contribute over 360,000 square feet of new office and commercial space, all in an area that's been identified for future job growth. This site, let's change this here. This site is located in the Central Business District in downtown Vancouver. Previous studies have identified a 6 million square foot shortfall of office space in the downtown area. To address this gap, Council adopted policy changes and zoning amendments in 2009, which restricted residential in favor of increased job space and commercial uses in the CBD shoulder area in blue and the CBD area outlined in orange. This was in an effort to close the gap in office deficiency towards economic vitality in the area. Since the adoption of this policy in 2009, we've seen a shift in the development community. Over 12 rezoning applications and development permits have been approved for job space. And also note that prior to 2009, residential uses were permitted and some still exist today. The site is located on Pender Street between Butte and Thurlow, outlined in orange. It's currently occupied by an existing 1974 15-story office building and well served by 4 SkyTrain stations, including Burrard Station. The surrounding blocks contain a mix of office, commercial, hotel, and residential buildings, those of which predate the 2009 CBD policy, with a range of heights between 10 stories and 63 stories. Immediately west and east are 2 towers containing office and residential, each with 2 childcare centers. These childcare centers will be further addressed in this presentation. Also, we have 1133 Melville just south of the site, which is under construction for 37 stories of office, as well as Harbor Green Park directly to the north, which have been carefully considered when designing the height and sculpting this building. Harbor Green Park is outlined in red. It covers a large portion of the seawall with green space, a bicycle route, restaurant, and water fountains. One entrance to the park is located off of Cordova, in which the entrance is covered with trees, planters, seating, and it's marked with a paved walkway. This image here shows the sculpting of the building to respect minimizing shadow impacts onto the park. With terracing on the upper portion of the building, the additional shadow cast, shown in yellow, is contained only to the edge of the sidewalk. To understand the impacts of developments on parks and open space, staff assess shadow impacts between the spring and the fall equinox. For this proposal, the additional shadow cast lasts only 37 minutes on the spring equinox and 36 minutes on the fall equinox, for a total of approximately 180 to 200 square feet of additional shadow cast. These shadow impacts were seen as very minimal in order to achieve additional office space. Also note that the design of this building received very strong support at the Urban Design Panel. Staff received very positive feedback, including support for new office and the design of the building. Since the pre-application open house in June 2018, the applicant has been very proactive in independently meeting with the childcare centers and the Strata Council members. Throughout public consultation, 2 main concerns were raised. 1, regarding the need for public space in the area, and 2, regarding the construction impacts on the outdoor childcare centers. First, to address public space, this proposal includes street improvements that animate the public realm, including a wider setback from Pender to allow additional planting and open space, as well as restaurant seating, new street trees, and a new pedestrian connection on the eastern edge of the site with additional landscaping. This pedestrian connection is linked to a series of other pedestrian walkways that help to break up this very long block. This new pathway enhances the street network and creates a seamless transition that feeds into a system of other connections and open spaces in the same block. Second, in regards to community concerns about the childcare centers, we have 2 adjacent childcare spaces, both operated by that nonprofit organization, the Vancouver Society of Children's Centers, also known as VSOC. Directly west, in blue, is Sapphire's outdoor space, and directly east, in pink, is Pender's outdoor space, both which sit next to the site. We heard from parents and childcare staff that the construction impacts across the lane at 1133 Melville has raised concerns about future construction impacts at 1166 West Pender for the childcare centers. Throughout this process, city staff met with the childcare centers, Vancouver Coastal Health, and parents, and VSOC to find solutions that work best for both centers, including the relocation of one center into one of VSOC's existing 800 spaces. All licensed childcare centers must have outdoor space as a key component of healthy childhood development. This image shows Sapphire's outdoor space on the third and the fourth story of the podium. Future redevelopment of 1166 West Pender would be approximately 30 feet away from this outdoor space. VCH and VSOC have a high level of confidence that with adequate protection of the site, continued operation for this childcare is very achievable. As a condition of rezoning, the applicant must work with VSOC and the city to develop a construction mitigation plan. This includes safety strategies to protect the play space, including low noise technology, shrink wrapping the existing site to contain debris, and installing sound barriers and protective covers. The applicant has also agreed to modify construction activities during outdoor playtime and nap time for the children. The applicant is expected to absorb all costs associated with this. The second space, Pender Street Children's Center, sits directly against 1166 West Pender, outlined in blue. Since the outdoor space was so exposed to construction, it was important to avoid the slightest possibility of creating any safety concerns for this childcare center during construction. Solutions had to be developed well in advance to avoid sudden closure or concerns. VSOC operates 800 licensed childcare spaces over 17 locations in the downtown part of Vancouver. You can see that outlined in pink. VSOC has agreed to temporarily absorb Pender's Center's operations into one of their existing 800 spaces during construction. Once Coastal Health deem that this facility can reopen, operations can resume here. The applicant has voluntarily agreed to contribute $250,000 in relocation expenses for VSOC, above and beyond the public benefits package provided here. Finally, for commercial office rezonings in the Central Business District, the applicant is to provide a commercial linkage contribution in the form of a cash contribution for $2.9 million as part of their overall public benefits package. This is allocated only to affordable housing and childcare projects in and around the area for a total public benefit package of $10.7 million. In conclusion, this rezoning application adds new office space close to transit in order to boost the deficiency in office space and to support the local economy. And the applicant has also demonstrated collaboration to address the childcare centers throughout this process. Staff recommend that this application be approved, subject to the conditions outlined in Appendix B. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Staff and the applicant team are available for questions.
Great, thanks very much for that. I'm just wondering if the applicant team is here. Would you like to speak to this now or wait for questions or? Please, yeah, please come forward. Just state your name for the record.
My name is Joanna Kwan. I'm a Senior Development Advisor for Reliance Properties. Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure to be here tonight representing Reliance Properties to present this exciting project for us at 1166 West Pender. We believe that this project supports the city's economic policies in creating new offices and job space in the Central Business District. We submitted our rezoning inquiry in May 2017. That's when we started our process. And working closely with the city staff and consulting with our neighbors, we come up with our current design, which is a 32-story building. And we would like to point out that our site is located in Zone 5 of the Downtown Official Development Plan, which allow for a 300-foot tower as a base building height, with the possibility to increase up to 450 square feet, 450 foot tall. So our proposal is under 400 feet, and it's within the allowed zone. Since day one, we understand the importance to reach out to the community and to our neighbors. And since last April, we have extensive conversation with our neighbors and with the daycare. And based on the feedback, we come up with the demolition mitigation plan, which we feel that we can ensure safety and enjoyment of our neighbors. And we also like to thank our neighbors and the daycare to spend the time with us and to give feedback to us, and that's valuable to us. And I would close this with, I'll close this offering our sincere thank again to the city staff for the direction and also for our commitment to deliver a high quality building in the city's downtown district, which we will own and operate for a long time. And I have our senior management team here today, and we have our architect, David Pontarini from Hariri Pontarini from Toronto. We have Martin from IBI, Rob, our landscape designer, and Kevin, our sustainable consultant here with us to answer questions. And thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions from council? I have the three folks here on the list, so please go ahead. Councillor Wiebe.
Yeah, my first two questions are staff. It says on the table that only for the purposes of the table, the amount's been split 50% childcare, 50% housing. I'm wondering why it states just for the table. Is that the amount that we will be delivered? Or it was just, I've never heard, that wording seemed interesting. Is that the exact amount that'll be delivered, or is it just, it could be something like that?
Good evening, Karen Here's Assistant Director of Planning, responsible for the Rezoning Center. The commercial linkage fee is divided between childcare and affordable housing. How that's allocated will depend on the need and any projects that come up in the future. So just for the table, we show it as a 50-50 split.
But it could go 90% to one and 10 to the other. Is that correct?
Yes, it could. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then on the second one, it talks about land uses. How come retail, service, institutional, cultural, and recreational were added as land uses under the recommended development?
Hi, Councillor Wiebe. In terms of land uses, the existing DD allows a number of those uses, and we introduce them back into the CD1 here. So we should be retaining those land uses, even though the proposed development did not show that. We just incorporated it for the purpose of the CD1 bylaw.
Okay, but there's a few that you didn't include, so I'm just wondering what the kind of priority was to include, not putting hotel, not putting some. So just wondering what the kind of
some
was.
In Section 2 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw. Sorry, in Section 2 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, some of those uses that exist in the DD currently are subgroups of the larger categories that you would see now in the CD1 bylaw. So hotel would be one example. So that comes in under service use. So I hope I explained that properly.
No, I think you got it. I appreciate it. And then I guess the last quick question is, what the mitigation for the childcare? From a staff side, do you feel that work has been, can you explain what work was done to really make sure that the project fit the needs of the childcare on both sides of the project?
Certainly. Because both childcare centers were oriented differently and at a different height, we definitely had to approach this with a two-pronged approach. In working through this process with VSOC, VCH, Reliance, and members of and parents from the childcare centers, I definitely think that we have a lot of confidence in what we've put forward here, and it definitely demonstrates a level of collaboration with all the different parties in order to arrive at a very achievable solution that also prioritizes the safety of the childcare centers.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Dominato.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of quick questions. I had a similar question to Councillor Weeb about the allocation of childcare and the housing. I just wanted to confirm that when reading the briefing note, the Metro Core, that those funds would be, whether it be used for housing or for childcare, or a combination would be in that sort of downtown core. Is that correct? My understanding?
Under the CAC policy, all of the commercial linkage contribution does go towards projects in the Metro Core, correct?
Okay, great. And then just a couple of questions around the specifically to the childcare is, I know there's the shadow study that's done with the building and the impact on the nearby park. Is there any implications for the outdoor spaces of the childcare centers in terms of shadow or, yeah?
What currently exists on that site is a 15-story office building. And so the incremental shadow cast with the addition of 17 stories of office, I don't believe will have any additional impact on versus what's currently there.
What's currently, okay.
Yeah.
And then just around the recognizing there is that cash contribution to go towards childcare in the future, I'm just wondering, was integration of childcare within the office building considered or contemplated given the need now? And I'm just wondering if that was part of the planning or thinking, or is a possibility still? I'm just curious.
Sure. The current proposal is a tower formation, and for childcare sites, the most optimal form of development is a tower and a podium. And that's for two reasons, as we understand, is as per the city's childcare design guideline requirements, we need adequate, sufficiently sized and contiguous outdoor space that's adjacent directly to indoor space. So that allows like staff from the indoor and outdoor spaces to see what's going on the same level. This did not have, this proposal did not introduce a podium. The site's probably just not big enough for it. For childcare spaces, we looked at an optimal size, an operationally optimal size is 37 spaces, and I think that's an equivalent to 5,500 square feet of outdoor space. Because it didn't have a podium, we couldn't see landing an outdoor space on this site suitable. The other thing also is, typically we see childcare spaces located on the 8th story or below in order to allow children and childcare workers to exit the building safely for fire. And locating it on the top of a 32-story tower was not at all appropriate. So, but we do have a commercial linkage contribution that does go toward childcare projects in and around the area.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor DeGenova.
Thanks very much. I appreciate this. I know that childcare, it's hard to get purpose-built childcare applicants wanting to build this in the city of Vancouver, and I've heard that it's specifically because it's not just the city of Vancouver. You have to go through licensing requirements on the other side as well. I'm wondering, in looking at this application, also looking at the motion that I'd moved forward, building a family-friendly Vancouver for affordable childcare that council passed and was supposed to, I believe it was supposed to be reported back, actually I have it here, in the spring, so I'm hoping that it's coming soon. It looks at expediting, or I should say prioritizing maybe, because we're not talking about cutting corners, we're talking about maybe speeding up the process of permitting, considering on the other side it can take a long time for the provincial, for the other processes that the applicant or the childcare provider would have to go through. And currently I know we don't provide occupancy for housing or other space unless usually the childcare has licensing and occupancy in some projects. So my question is are we going to be providing occupancy regardless? Is there any chance of that? And if any recommendations come back to council from this motion, would they apply in expediting? So if any policy came back recommended by staff to expedite and make sure that the childcare moved faster, knowing that that's something that's needed in Vancouver, could the permits for this specific project move faster? Just knowing how difficult that can be right now.
Councillor DiGenova, my name's Catherine Buckham. I'm a senior planner with social policy. If I could rephrase your question, is your question, could we expedite a site like this or this site because of the adjacent childcare issues?
Well, I'm only allowed to talk about this site, and yes, I'm wondering if policy comes forward after this, if a decision's made and this moves forward today, and policy to expedite comes after that, would this project apply for that? But I wanted to give the context of I would expect a report back because we're almost in summer, and this was supposed to be reported back in spring.
Right, so I understand the question.
Thanks.
I think this is really a question for planning about expediting the possibility of if we
I just want to make sure that because it came before a policy, it doesn't mean that it won't apply to the project.
Right.
Thank you.
This particular project is an office building. It does not have a childcare as part of it. So the childcares are in the adjacent sites. So
is there any licensing required to relocate the childcare?
Any location for a childcare would require to be licensed, but the childcares are being, or one of the childcares will be relocated through VSOC, which has licensing for other childcare. So our children are being placed in other childcare facilities.
Okay, thank you. That helps. I thought you were talking about relocating to a completely different site, a brand new childcare space. So that's what I got from the presentation. I didn't get that from the report, so I was frantically writing and looking for this.
Well,
and I was afraid that might hold everything up. So that makes a lot more sense. Yeah. Thank you. So they are absorbing that within their current VSOC sites.
That's right, yeah.
All right, thanks. Because it said relocation of the childcare. I wasn't sure if that meant the entire site. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So we have no more questions from council, so we'll move to the speakers. And I have 5 speakers, starting with Norm Taylor. Just whenever you get situated, you have 5 minutes, and there may be questions from councillors.
I do think there is a presentation to be posted.
Okay, great. Let's give you a sec to pull that up. Or
thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. And the reason that I'm here is to actually give a context of the office leasing market in Metro Vancouver and specifically in downtown Vancouver to give you a lay of the land of where we sit today in the marketplace. So
you just state your name and where you're from?
Pardon me, Norm Taylor, and I'm the Executive Managing Director of CBRE.
Thanks very much.
Do I have a clicker? I think I do. There we go. So when you look at the office leasing market, you've got to start with demand and talk about the demand that's in the marketplace. It's no secret I've been here, I think, twice or 3 times before to talk about the demand that's coming into our marketplace, both new demand coming from across the border and internationally. The big difference between what I've presented in the past and what you're going to see here today is that technology has actually dropped. Last time I was here, it was at 49%, and it's down to 26%. That's a good thing because it's a more diversified economy when you look across the demand levels that are out there. Currently, we are tracking 1.8 million square feet of demand. That's active tenants in the market looking for office space as we speak. So it's always hard to measure demand. The only thing we can do is look at real estate tours that are going on with the brokers that are out there and all the requirements we have, and that's how we generate this information. After demand comes supply, and obviously we're in a very strong construction market right now downtown, and I'll address the new supply that's coming. But of the existing stock that we have in place today, the overall market for downtown Vancouver is at 23.9 million square feet. Vacancy, I'm not sure if you saw the media today, but we just, my firm is a global, the world's largest commercial real estate services firm. We just put out a North American-wide report, and Vancouver and Toronto are tied for the lowest vacancy in the existing stock for the #1 position, and we're the tightest market that there is in all of North America. Our vacancy currently sits at 2.6% across all classes. We do divide down to AAA, A, B, and C, and you can see the size of the markets, the B class and A class kind of being tied at the largest markets. And what we're seeing with B being at the tightest or lowest vacancy, that's because of pricing. When you get to vacancy at this price, you're going to have rental rates that are escalating, and so people tend to downgrade to lesser quality space. Just going back actually on the supply as well, when I was here the last time, I think it was June of 2018, and to put that into perspective, our vacancy at that point in time was 4.7%. So we've gone down to 2.6 over a year. We do expect it to continue to decline. And we talk about a balanced market at about 8% vacancy. That's when a tenant and a landlord are equal at the negotiating table in negotiating terms of the lease and the rent. When we look at the market today, I'm going to point out on this slide that we talk about downtown Vancouver availability, not vacancy. The difference between availability and vacancy is what's physically sitting vacant. Availability is what we know is going to be coming back to the market, but you could negotiate it today. So if I had a client that was looking for right now 50,000 square feet, there is no vacant space for them. We can't house them. In fact, if I had a client that's 20,000 square feet or greater, there is nothing. There is availability in one unit above 50,000 square feet, and that's the Deloitte space when they relocate out of Bentall 4, 1055 Dunsmuir. You can negotiate that today, but you can't actually occupy that until December of 2019, the end of this year. So no one can move in. On the two that are above 20,000 square feet, that's 1040 Homer Street, which is in Yaletown. It's actively under offer right now. And the final one is 925 West Georgia, Cathedral Place. The BDO floors are coming back, and they're not vacant until 2020. I'll have to speed through a couple of remarks here quickly. Another thing that we look at, I just jumped through. Sublease, a quick KPI we look at. Back in 2013, we had 228 subleases for a total of over 1 million square feet of availability. Today, we're at 27 and 113,000. So the solution is not subleasing. On the new supply, this is what really becomes the important part, and I may run a little bit over if that's okay, Your Worship.
Well, I'm going to, you're just at 5 minutes now, but I'd actually like to see the rest, this supply side, so I'm going to ask you a question of what's going on with supply in our market.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
So the new supply, the elephant in the room is everyone's talking about, we're adding 3.8 million square feet of new supply, and can the market handle that? I'm going to take you through them. So starting at, it's hard for me to actually see what's there, but starting at 1280 Burrard, that building is showing 100% available. It is rumored to be under offer at this point in time that will fill it to 100% occupancy in the coming months. So stay tuned on that one. The next three you can see are 100% pre-leased, and those are under construction right now. And the fourth one is PCI's development at 601 West Hastings Street. That one is the one that doesn't have any leasing at this point in time, but it's a small floor plate. It's a 7,000 square foot unique building. And so that one will probably be a little bit slower to lease, but with timing, it should be well placed for the developer. And finally, GWL's project, Vancouver Centre 2, is also starting to lease up quite quickly. So that's the next 2 years, which is the horizon that most tenants will look at from a lease perspective. If we go further out and go as far as 4 years in the pipeline, we've got Bose's project, which is half pre-sold as strata, and they're not actively leasing the top floors because they want to see where the market's going to go. On the stack, that has now got Ernst & Young, Blake's, and it's escaping me, the third tenant. I can't read it from here. Sorry, my apologies. And then finally, you've got two more buildings that are basically now 50% leased, one being the Amazon at the Post. So when we look at all that new supply and what's coming available, we've got 3.8 million square feet of new space. 1.8 million square feet of it is already spoken for or gone. That means 49% of all the new construction is pre-leased. That is outstanding from a financial perspective and a results perspective. We usually assume 30% on the date the building is delivered. And we've got net new absorption. Of that 1.8 million square feet, 1 million of it is pure growth or new tenants into our marketplace. So only 800,000 of it is existing tenants moving. So what's the forecast? What does this all mean? I know this one's a really meaty graph, so I'm going to go to the quick summary. That's basically a 10-year horizon of vacancy and absorption, and you can digest it later. But the key point is the forecast, and this is my last slide. When we take as I said, 30% pre-leasing, and we take a 10-year average absorption of 230,000 square feet per year, which we're way above that right now, but the 10-year average to be conservative, and we put every new building that we've got in the pipeline coming into the system on their delivery schedule, if you do that math, we're going to come out at a 6.2% vacancy. And so can we handle more supply, and do we need more supply in Vancouver? Absolutely, yes. It will not crater the market, provided we don't have any economic major downturn. Thank you very much. If there's any questions.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And I don't see any other questions on the queue. There's Councillor Kirby-Young. Please go ahead, Councillor Kirby-Young.
Great, thank you. I do have just one question, and that's in terms of supply. Do you envision that this building exemplifies the right type of supply of what your clients are looking for in the Vancouver market?
Yeah, one of the unique things about this building is it's actually in the CBD. I don't have another slide that I've brought to the presentations before. As you look at a lot of the new supply, and it's on the fringe of the downtown core. 601 West Hastings, the small floor plate, is in the CBD as well. But that's what we're in Vancouver. We're really stuck with small infill sites for development of these office buildings. And I can tell you those smaller buildings are challenging for larger organizations and growing organizations, and our market is maturing.
And what kind of companies would you envision, and you don't have to be specific, but going to this building in terms of what type of jobs and economic drivers?
This will be a full range of the demand that I showed there. You'll see technology. I think you will see legal. You'll see accounting, professional services, engineering, real estate. There's a full gamut. A downtown office building is anyone that needs to be downtown.
Okay, so diversified but skilled quality jobs.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. And that is it for questions. So thank you for your time today. We'll go to the second speaker, Charles Gauthier, followed by third, Alan Featherstone, Rudy Zapernik, and Janine Scatfield. So Mr. Gauthier, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad that Norm Taylor from CBRE was here first. I think we did this last time. You came up first. You answered all the questions about the market, and then I came here and spoke in favor of the project. And so I'm here on behalf of the Downtown Vancouver BIA speaking in favor of the project for a lot of the reasons you heard from both Mr. Taylor and then from your own city staff. This building is located in the CBD. Our office building where we are in, we're literally 2 doors down from that building. And we certainly would welcome new commercial space located nearby. The other point that I want to make is that, and again, your city staff pointed this out, the proximity to transit. Certainly, we're finding out that younger demographic are choosing to commute to work, cycling, walking, taking transit, or living within the downtown area. And so for those reasons, we think this building really fits in really well with what we're seeing in terms of trends. The other thing I want to comment on is that, again, a lot of commercial buildings are in this vicinity. And the building, from our perspective, is built to high standards of sustainability and energy efficiency. And I'll finish off by saying that, we certainly would agree that there are a lot of public realm amenities in the immediate area. A couple that I would add to the list that your staff person spoke about is the seawall and the convention center within close proximity in that huge public plaza available at Jack Pool. So we don't have any concerns about supporting this project.
Great. Thanks very much. I don't see anybody in list for questions. Great. Appreciate your coming in tonight. Alan Featherstone. Number 3, number 4, Rudy Zapernik.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors. I'm just an ordinary citizen who's had an interest in urban issues for the last, I don't want to say how many, I mentioned it last time how many years, but I don't want anybody to know how long it's been. and I'm supporting this development for several specific reasons. One, first of all, it's in the downtown core, which is surrounded by other buildings of this nature, and it's an office that will fit into all, it's not out of the ordinary, so a rezoning change doesn't really change much as far as the as the landscape is concerned. In other words, it's not like a spot rezoning in the middle of a residential area where you're going to put in a 15-story tower and single-family issues. Also, the design is very interesting, not strictly a box. We've had a lot of buildings built in Vancouver. All you have to do is look from the south side of False Creek to the north, and they're all the same color, roughly the same shape. And this is a different and an interesting architectural design. It's close to, Harbor Green Park, close to transit. And, I really think we need some more innovative and bold designs in the downtown core. The city also needs to ensure that there's enough office space in the downtown that offices and businesses that are currently there have space to expand. If they cannot find the space downtown, they will move to the other cities and require those who live downtown to commute to those areas, because there are a lot of people who do live downtown because they want to be close to, in the West End, in Marathon property, et cetera, Harbor Green, and downtown south, because they want to be close to where they work. And this is an important factor for them. But I've known a number of people who moved to those areas for that reason, who've had their offices and businesses move outside of the city. So now we have a reverse commute. It used to be that most of the commuting came into the downtown. Now there is a certain amount of it that is accessing or leaving every day. There's also, a great deal of housing, and that's really important. And I sympathize with those who are going to say that they're going to lose their view or privacy. I understand the disappointment, but realistically, in a growing city like Vancouver, changes in zoning and new buildings are going to happen. A view from one's residence or office is not guaranteed. There's no money-back guarantee when you buy real estate that you're going to be, your view is going to be guaranteed forever. And if you have a 33-foot lot in Vancouver, as many of them are, some houses are as close as 6 feet to between each other. Some of them do have windows that face each other. People live that way on a very low level. So at the high-rise level, that can be a problem, but it can be addressed, as people who live in houses do. If they have bathrooms that face, their other homes or somebody's dining room window, they mitigate that somehow. So I think that's really quite important. And I think that as many have mentioned, the amenities are really quite important too. That's always been something that I've always thought was important. The amenities that are added to the community, so that it makes it not just for the people who work downtown, but also people who may live close by, who can have access to them as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. I don't see anybody ask any questions, so we're on to the next speaker. Thank you. So we have Rudy as a Pernick, and I've said that differently 3 times in a row, so I hope I got it right at one of those. Okay, thanks. And Janine Scatfeld after that. The clerk will get that from you. Great, thank you.
I take it everybody has one. Yeah. So my name is Rudy, and my last name is Zapernick, and my wife and I are the owners of the penthouse at the Sapphire Building, which is adjacent to this new proposed building. So basically, from our standpoint of view, I don't think there's been any real consideration in the privacy of a lot of the residents that are residing in the east wing of our building. And I brought this along to sort of give you sort of an idea from our perspective, what we look at right at the moment. As you can see in page 1, which is the deck, and the building directly below is going to be the proposed new building. And then as you turn your page, you can see this is coming right from our master bedroom, which means that our bed is located right where I'm actually taking the photograph. This is while the windows are open and there's no building there. And you go to page number 3, a different angle from there as well. And if we move along to number 4, we have a window with a bathtub that looks straight out, that will look at that building. And I can stop us right here. What my problem is with all of this is there's been really no understanding for the privacy of the residents there. And in our particular case, you could probably imagine that we will have to have our curtains and our blinds closed for pretty much most of the time, because we're going to have balconies pretty much looking straight at us the entire time. As you can tell, I'm personally against the height of this building and so forth, because there's been no consideration. I've had an opportunity to talk to our council and represent a lot of the owners of the building, and I understand that what we're doing here is we're discussing really what are the important things for the city in regards to allowing more office space and the childcare and all this sort of stuff. But I think there needs to be a closer look at like what the residents also. I mean, the lack of sunlight is going to be an issue here, since the sun comes in the east, right? And I mean, we're worried about the park at the front, and we're worried about the child daycare and these kind of things. I think these sort of things also need to be taken into consideration. If you go to page number 5, it's a direct view from our bathtub as well, right? So you can see. So imagine having balconies looking straight down at you in this particular case, right? We own the 34th and in the upper floor, the complete 2 floors. So it's going to be quite an impact. We've also are right now with a current permit and in the middle of upgrading our suite, which we've spent about 1.5 million on the upgrade in this unit. So we are now at the tail end of closing our permit with some last final touches. So if you turn to page 6 as well, this illustrates what will be seen pretty much once this building is put up and all the balconies are in their place. Number 7 is our closet. So we have our walk-through closet, which is part of that entire east wing of the building. Those blinds would have to be shut pretty much the entire time. And looking out of that closet, you can see the existing building that is there. That is what Reliance is proposing to have removed to replace with their building. So you can kind of get the magnitude of this building and its proximity and what it will look like. Also with their model, having all these balconies pretty much facing you. As well, I've included in the image in number 9, you can see the other tower, which is going to be directly behind it. And so basically we're basically crowded in between 2 large towers. Now, when the Sapphire was built, I mean, I in my personal belief, it was the mistake of the city to allow that building to be put in that corridor. Now that residential building's there, the council has to consider the fact that you're stuck with this problem. Do we want to create a second problem and put basically three large towers surrounding 1 small residential tower? I think this is a fact that needs to be looked at very carefully, because you have this Reliance building, you have the one directly behind, and then you have the Melville building right behind. So, I mean, we're basically crowded with large towers, giving us really no privacy from any angle. And I understand what the last speaker was saying, that, we all have to get over this, to get over that, but unfortunately, that's not the case for us. I mean, especially when we're residents that permanently live there, we have to have some form of pleasure of living To just come in and just say, well, we need more office space and let's just drop this big, giant building in front of our unit, I don't think is just really
Thanks very
acceptable
much.
personally.
That's 5 minutes, so thank you very much for coming in. I don't see anybody on the question list for you, so appreciate you spending the time.
Yeah, we're against it. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have Janine Scatfeld. Thanks very much. Up to 5 minutes.
Okay, yes. My name is Janine Skaftfeld, and I am here as a resident of the building right next door to the building that is being talked about today. It's 1188 the Sapphire, as where Rudy was just speaking. I don't have anything prepared. I would like to, well, first of all, it's a beautiful building that they're proposing. I'm happy that you are considering the impact on the children's daycare, et cetera. The numbers are dazzling, of course. They're also, quite solid in their presentation of what we're going to need in the future. But I'd like to just take a moment to put a little bit of a human aspect to this. I moved into that neighborhood 10 years ago when the Sapphire next to this property, 1188, is my property, 10 years ago. And I was looking for a place that was already developed so that it would suit my needs as a resident. And the Olympics came along, and suddenly we were in an explosion of development in the city, and we have not stopped since. In fact, we have escalated over the last several years. And while progress is great, we all like to see progress, there's some human aspects that can't be ignored. And I think that you have to forgive me. I don't, this is the first time I've been on council, so I don't know the etiquette. But I would like to present something that I have taken from my railing off of my balcony. I just want you to know that I cannot use my balcony. And my balcony faces north. I'm on the 23rd floor. And increasingly, I cannot use that balcony because of the amount of dust that is coming onto that balcony. I am so concerned to the point where I keep my windows and my door shut most of the time and only open them at night or when it's raining, when I think maybe the dust would settle. Could I just ask you if I can show you something?
Yes, please. The clerk will take it from you.
So this was taken from my balcony just a week ago. I cleaned it very well, and this is just before I came. So this is something I deal with on a regular basis, year after year after year. I'm concerned about the health aspect of all this development, all the concentrated amount of development that is happening. From a health perspective, from a person who lives there 24/7, breathing that air, not to mention the noise. I'm not even going to go there with the noise. I'm more concerned about my and my neighbor's health in terms of the concentrated amount of development that's going on. The dust doesn't even settle before the next building is started. And I didn't get a chance to ask, but I'm assuming that the existing building there is going to be demolished. Is that correct? And so I appreciate that you're going to cover and so forth, but I have been witness to many things over the 10 years, and what I can tell you is that's not enough. And it's not enough because I see this all the time, to the point where I have to actually remove my cream-colored carpet and put flooring in so that I can just wipe it clean. My cream-colored carpet is a nice gray color now. So I think that there has to be some attention to the fact that while it's difficult to quantify what health effects we have, I think that we have to be mindful of how much construction is happening in a concentrated area in a certain period of time when realistically this building at 1166 could be just redecorated, revamped, with much less impact on our environment. And I have no opposition to tearing down buildings that are needing to be torn down and started again. I just feel that this building beside us is quite solid. It looks like a good building, a good candidate for redevelopment in the terms of redecorating. That's really all I have to say.
Great. Thank you very much. I don't see any questions from council, but appreciate you coming in this evening. And that's it. And we have no. That's it for speakers on the list officially. Yep. But I'm just going to call now for anybody else from the audience that would like to speak to this. So please come ahead, sir. And you also have up to 5 minutes. Just to state your name would be great. Thanks very much.
Hi. My name is Abbas Afkami. I'm a resident of 1188 West Pender, and I've been a resident since the building was built and an owner since 2012. I've listened to the presentation and I've listened to all the different angles that have been presented. It seems like not all stakeholders were consulted. The focus seems to be more on the economic aspect of the matter and some sensitive subject around the childcare and contribution towards it. We're, as Rudy also mentioned, we're talking about the effects of the shadow in a park that's almost 2 blocks away from us, but not really considering the effects of the building next door, a residential building that was permitted not too long ago to be built. My main focus is on losing privacy. I am in the 04 unit, and I have chosen this particular floor, which is 3 floors to the penthouse, to clear most of the buildings around, to be able to get natural light, to have the privacy, and to be able to enjoy it for my personal use. But with the building coming next door, we're going to lose our privacy, and we're going to lose it very bad. And since I've learned about this new project, I've actually tried putting down all my blinds to see the effects of it personally. And it's been, I feel like I'm living in a prison as a result of it, which means that once that building is built, that needs to be the way to live. I'm losing all privacy because it's looking right into my master bedroom and living area, and won't be able to use the balcony either. We're going to be losing the natural light. There's going to be a significant drop in the value of the properties. The noise from the construction, we're already experiencing that from the stack building right behind us. And I don't know what sort of promises they made in terms of reducing the noise, reducing the dust, but they start probably from 7 in the morning and they go until 7, 8 at night, even on Saturdays. So try living in that area for a day, and you guys will all change your mind. The traffic congestion in the area is already really, really bad, specifically in the back alley where is the entrance to parking for most of those buildings. We already have the Melville building, which is a residential building right behind us, and our building and a few other commercial units. With the stack building coming in, the entrance to the parking is also going to be through the back. We also have the childcare centers, which all the parents are coming to drop off their kids and go back. And the entrance to the exit from the back alley to Butte is right around the corner, and it's 1 lane. The traffic is always backed up. Trying to get out of the house is already an issue. Trying to add many more cars to that is going to be a disaster. The pollution from all the machinery working, all the dust from the demolition and construction, all the health concerns that Janine also mentioned, I share the same. I have the same issue. I just didn't bring, a sample to show you, but I think that's very apparent. In the event of a natural disaster, if there's a fire, I have evacuation concerns from having so much congestion in a very small corridor. last but not least, I believe some of the information that was presented in terms of office demand and everything else is great. I own an office 2 blocks down from where I live, which is Broughton and Pender, and I have offices sitting vacant with no demand or no one even asking how much it's being rented for. So, and that's been the case for the past 3 years that I've owned the building. So I just wanted to bring that up, that maybe some of the stats also needs to be looked at. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much for your time. You do have a question, Councillor Dejanova?
Yes, thank you very much. I was just actually looking at the site. You had mentioned that you feel that your privacy is going to be gone, and in the context of also saying that appropriate stakeholders, I believe you said, weren't consulted. How did you feel they weren't consulted? Who wasn't consulted?
Well, it seems that a lot of focus has been put on the childcare center and also the shadow. I did not hear anything about any of the residents or strata being consulted in making the plans and the proposal. You know, to technically make changes to the bylaw to go almost, you know, almost double the existing building height.
Okay, so I see here that there was a public open house and people had the opportunity to go to it and to comment, and I'm wondering, did you not know about that open house? Did you go to that?
No, I didn't know about it.
Okay, so that was, but knowing that there was one, do you feel that there was more consultation?
Well, I mean, in none of the presentations I heard anything that you know, we have heard the concerns, and this is how we've incorporated it into our proposal.
Okay, so then on page 4 of the policy report, which is online, and have you reviewed this?
No.
At all? It actually lists, and I won't go through them all, but there's at least maybe 24 different addresses and notes here on the surrounding context, including the Melville, a 12-story office building, the Sapphire, Coast Hotel, Clarica, the Stack, Orca Place, Melville Place, the residence on Georgia, Trump Tower, Harborside 1 and 2. I'm not going to go through all of them, but do you feel that, I mean, in the context of how they were considered, do you not feel that that was thorough in going through that? Because that's up online for the public to be able to view as well.
I understand.
The report.
We're the heart of sort of that matter, which is existing building right beside them. Trump Tower has at least 2 blocks distance. Any other buildings are not adjacent. We're the adjacent building.
Okay, and your building, sir, is?
1188 West Pender.
1188 West Pender. Okay, and it is, so you're 1188.
Yes, the Sapphire building.
Yeah, it's right here. It's right here, so it actually says the Sapphire 34 strata residential building with ground floor commercial uses and a childcare center. So, I mean, it does say that there's the surrounding context, and there was a public open house. I mean, also in looking at sort of what will be coming of this, and that there are some economic opportunities, and that we hear that office space from other speakers is definitely needed. Did you expect that there wouldn't be anything going up next to you? Were you ever told that? Were you, in the context of most people I hear from that move downtown, expect there to be new development, and that might bring greater densities and height?
Don't get me wrong. I'm not against progress. I'm not against new buildings, and that's not the purpose. I think you're putting a lot of words in my mouth without even saying it.
I'm asking questions.
My concern is the density that's being placed in a very small area, and I've pointed out all the concerns. If you pay attention to all the other buildings, they're more scattered. I mean, we are the only residential building on that block. Everything else is commercial. So I have no problem with building being built there with current bylaws, which is significantly lower, and also density, the number of people, the traffic. Janine also mentioned that building doesn't need to be torn down. Again, this is more an observation than anything else. I'm sure they've done their math on the age of the building, and
You had also mentioned people dropping their children off for childcare.
yes.
We have a childcare crisis and a housing crisis, an affordability crisis. How would you suppose we should weigh that? I only have 10 seconds left, but do you think that should be a consideration of council?
Oh, definitely. I'm not saying we should discount that, but that's not the only aspect, or that's not the only dimension to look at.
Thanks very much. That's
Check out page 4 of the policy report.
There we go.
Thank you.
Councillor Weeb.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, a couple. At you talked about the balconies looking down on yours. Are there things that you think that the building could do to have a little setback with the plant so that people aren't looking directly over? Or is it a type of glass? Is there anything that you think that this building or mitigation that you've asked the proponent to look at when you develop this building?
Definitely height and distance.
And distance.
It's too close to our building, and the proposed building is too high for where it's located.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And before you go, sir, could we have your name again just for the record?
Yes, Abbas Afkami.
Okay. And could you spell your last name for us?
Afkhami.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming in tonight. Do anybody else like to speak to this? Okay, please come forward and just state your name, and you have up to 5 minutes. You may have questions. Please go ahead. And please state your name for the record.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Nicole Majorkowicz, Majorkiewiczz. I live in Harborside Park Tower 1, and I also work downtown. I'm here today in support of the project for 1166 West Pender Street. I believe our city is nestled amongst some of the most incredible natural landscapes in the world, and the proposed design of this project helps to protect and exemplify the natural setting of the city. The architects have clearly created a design that doesn't produce troublesome shadows, and in my view, the overall design is unique, which is something I think we could be encouraging. Moreover, this project differs greatly in comparison to the other buildings, and I believe will help move our business district beyond basic rectangular structures. It appears to have been thoughtfully designed to efficiently use and create space, and as a resident in the area, I very much appreciate this. Also, I think the proposed walkway along the side of the site is a great idea. This will do wonders in really opening up the space for pedestrians walking to and from work, like myself, for example. And once the Melville Street project is built, it will connect Melville and Pender. Overall, I think this building will be one of those that will help elevate Vancouver's downtown core to be a unique, desirable place for both residents and businesses. It is for these reasons that I hope this project goes through tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming in. And Councillor Weeb, I have a question for you.
A quick question, since you're not in the building right beside or nearby, how did you find out about the rezoning to come here and speak tonight?
I received it in the mail.
In the mail?
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Okay. Anybody else like to speak to this? No, sorry, we've got a 5-minute limit for each speaker, so thanks very much. Anybody else like to come speak? Okay, so I'll do 3 calls then, one last time. Anybody else? Thanks very much. Seeing there are no speakers now, the speakers list is now closed. As few or no public comments were received on this item after 5 p.m. today, I suggest we now close the receipt of public comments and move on to hearing closing comments, asking further questions to staff, and to make a decision. Does the applicant have any closing comments? There might be, nope, okay, we're fine. Thanks very much. Staff have any closing comments? No? Okay, thanks very much. Does council have any questions for staff? Councillor Fry, Councillor Dominato. Go ahead, Councillor Fry. Oh. Can you just move your mic down a little bit closer? Sure. Thanks very much.
Just a little question about the FSR. Am I reading this correctly that the typical permitted density would be a 9 FSR and this is a 19.4?
Under the current DD, the existing zoning, the permitted density is 9.0, and this application is proposing to increase that to 19.4 under the new CD1 that it would be.
Right. So, and so then I realize it's not a community amenity contribution per se, it's got the other title to it, the business corridor or whatever it was. Is that a commensurate amount of public benefit to this significant increase in FSR?
According to the CAC policy, we do apply a $15 a square foot fixed rate CAC to the total buildable floor space. So yes.
And it's flat, you could go as high as you want with FSR and there's no trigger for an additional?
Well, because it's $15 per square feet, it would apply to the increase in the square feet. So if it goes higher than that, total commercial linkage contribution would go higher, but the square foot in terms of the fixed rate CSC would not.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Councillor Dominato.
Thank you. And just really briefly, just because the questions were raised by a couple of speakers around the implications for privacy, I'm just wondering if that was taken into consideration in terms of the current design of the building. And I know we've seen with some other projects where there's been attempts at sort of either it's the setbacks or it's screening and other things. So I'm just curious if that was part of the conversation in this proposal. So.
Hi, I'm Paul Chang, Senior Development Planner for this project. We have a basic rule of thumb that we administer for downtown projects. And basically, when it comes to residential towers, any new development should be no less than 80 feet away from a residential tower. So you'll notice that even in plan, this particular building has actually been carved at the north west corner in order to maintain that 80 feet separation. Okay. Now that 80-foot separation does neutralize sites in the downtown area to keep them from becoming towers. In this case, it didn't. The 80 feet is a distance that we regard as an acceptable viewing distance from any particular residential building. When you think about even our single-family areas, for instance, when someone looks out of their living room window out of their house, they look across the street that's about 66 feet. There's front yards on either side, so it's about 80 or 90 feet. So we try to keep that kind of standard of livability for all residential units in the downtown area.
Okay, and I guess just with if the project is supported tonight, is there any opportunity for further discussion around that in terms of the building design or any other measures to sort of address some of the concerns we heard from residents in that neighboring adjacent building?
It would be a difficult conversation, but I think maybe perhaps during the development permit phase, we could look at the possibility of looking at those particular terraces that were mentioned by some of the residents. We could probably explore with the owner exactly when the terraces would most likely be used. Our thinking is probably during the daytime, during business hours, is probably more likely than, say, late evening or other times when the residents are really needing their privacy at night.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby.
Thank you. I have a question that might be best directed to the applicant, but staff might want to comment as well. And that's really around sort of the form and the renderings of the building, because I'm intrigued and pleased to see something that has some uniqueness to the design. It's got curvature, it's got sort of an interesting staggering and setback of the balconies, and it appears to be quite light and bright. And renderings are always, I think, complementary of the design. So I guess I'm wondering, my question is, how true are the renderings and how much confidence can we have that the building, when built, is going to be sort of have this sort of lightness despite the scale and the scope of the building? It does appear relative to the other buildings to have that lightness, if I can use that word around it. So I'm wondering if we can comment on whether or not we're going to see that.
Actually, at this stage in the process, we're just able to ask staff.
Okay, I'll ask that to staff.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm told that as staff, I am permitted to ask the applicant to actually comment as well, but I will just mention a couple of things. There are a couple of design conditions that we have recommended to council to ensure certain facets of this design will be followed through. For example, you do see some curved glass as a
Yes.
very a major element in the way this building is being expressed. We are wanting to ensure that curved glass will be used and not straight glass that gives you that faceted look that we're trying to avoid here.
Right.
There are other design conditions that to ensuring that the execution of the building will go as we are seeing in the renderings at this point. If I may ask the applicant to come and speak about the building some
No,
more to give
sorry.
assurance. No?
Sorry, no,
Okay.
that part's closed. Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions?
No, just clarification. Another point on procedure would be great because I did understand that staff were able to ask the applicant as well, so that would be good
Yeah,
too.
that's a little earlier in the process where we have an app right at the beginning. We're allowed to ask questions to the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dejanova.
I just had a question on the consultation because it was questioned before. And on page 4 of the policy report, I just wanted to make sure that I was correct in looking at the surrounding context, that there was notice that was delivered to a strata, or that these several buildings that are listed, some of them strata buildings, some of them mixed residential, would have had invitations to or be made aware of the open house.
Certainly. Prior to the applicant submitting an actual application, we know that since April of 2018, the applicant has actually met with the folks from the Melville, the Sapphire, as well as different hotels and developments in and around the area. So that was one point of contact. We also know that a pre-application open house was held in June of last year. We also had an application open house that was held in January 22nd of 2019, so just recently. So we had 2 open houses, as well as I believe the applicant met with the folks from the Sapphire building at least twice. So that provided an extra level of reaching out that they weren't required to do.
Okay.
And also, for pre-application open houses and open houses, we mail out postcards within the 2-block radius.
Okay.
So some 6,500 postcards went out. Also, in November of 2018, so about 7 months ago, a site sign is installed on the front of that building, so people walking by or driving by are aware of the project. And that gets updated when we know when our open house date and our public hearing dates are.
Thanks. And then in figure 2, surrounding context, I suppose this would be information that's compelled into the recommendation by staff, but there'd been thought given beyond even, I see, the 2-block radius.
In certain circumstances,
Yes.
depending on the neighborhood, it is.
Yeah, but there is quite a thorough list here. So I see, I see A through Y.
Yep.
Noted. So either they're noted in the surrounding context, but that doesn't necessarily mean there was consultation. As you said, there was consultation with many of them, depending on their proximity.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that's it for questions to staff, unless there's any more. Great, okay, so Councillor Dejanova?
Happy to move a motion.
Okay, move the motion, thanks very much. We
Happy
have
to
a
put the
second.
motion on the floor.
Thank you. Councillor Dominato, second. So Council, is there, I have Councillor Kirby-Young, or did you want to
I'm
go?
happy to speak to.
Okay, go,
motion.
please go ahead. Yeah, I'll just reset your timer. There you
I wanted to thank each and every individual who came out to speak to this, and I'm sorry I can't see some of you. I'm quite short, and there's a model in front of me, but I wanted to thank you for your time. I wanted to note that I think that it is very important that as we look forward, and as was very eloquently described by some of our speakers, that gave us a bit of a bird's eye view into the market, especially when it comes to office space, and particularly space that I suppose not only companies, businesses that do influence the economic situation of our city are looking at, those that are maybe moving, would free up to give us a real context as to what there is for office space in the city of Vancouver. And I think that we have to carefully consider that. We are in a housing crisis, but people also need places to go to work in some cases. I think it's great if people can work from home, but that's not the case for absolutely everyone. I really do appreciate that the applicant here, I can see through the contribution to make sure that there's smooth relocation. And I thank staff and the applicant for clarifying that it's not relocation of the entire childcare, but I suppose we would call it a redistribution of those childcare spaces to make sure that none of those spaces are lost in the meantime. I appreciate that. I think that's going above and beyond, and I see here also the other public benefits and contributions. So I'm happy to support this this evening, and regardless of if you came to speak in support or against, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thank you. I appreciate this application, and particularly the gentleman from CBRE who spoke, because I think one thing that I'm hoping we're going to talk more and more about at Council is really the impact of economics as it relates to affordability and having quality jobs and economic drivers in order for people to be able to afford to live in the city. And it's particularly striking when we hear we're battling Toronto for the #1 lowest vacancy rate, and that by 2023 we might get back to a couple of points. I think it was said around 6.2% below what's considered sort of a balanced from a sort of a lessee and a lessor perspective in the market. So I do think that we really need that office space. I'm sensitive to the individuals and the residences that came to speak, and I appreciate them coming out to do that with the impact that they have. I think for council it's always difficult because we have to weigh all of the input and sort of look at the greater public good. What I do note about this particular project, in addition to much needed office space, and I was just doing some math on the cash contribution provided towards childcare, affordable housing, and the citywide DCL and utilities DCL, it's about $3,000 short of $10 million, which is a significant contribution for council to be able to materially contribute and direct towards some of our key priorities that we've had a lot of discussion tonight around childcare and housing. That said, I think one thing that I'm most intrigued about with this project is the fact that it's not another flat-planed type of box, but it does have some uniqueness to the design, and that when we're building a city, I'm always hopeful that we marry form and function, and we're not just putting in sort of the desired uses, but we're also doing it in a way that we're building some architectural interest in the city. So I am comfortable supporting this application on the assurance from staff, and I was looking at some nodding going on in the applicant team. I know we couldn't ask questions officially at that point in the process. I'm trusting that vision is going to be fulfilled, because renderings can be beautiful and they can be complementary, but I'm hopeful and trusting what I've heard that we're going to see that executed in the actual construction of the building, that it's going to provide that bit of architectural interest from what we have been putting up and sort of that lightness in the corridor, because I think that will also help in terms of mitigation of sort of people feeling that density that's going in there. So with all of that said, I will be supporting the application. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, thanks to staff for work on this, and kudos to the architect. I find it to be actually quite an attractive and thoughtful, sensitive design, all things considered. I do think that I hear Councillor Kirby-Young, and I do agree that the 7 million DCL is a significant contribution, although I can't help but think that with almost doubling the FSR, the $3 million commercial linkage fee, it feels like we're leaving money on the table, and I realize that's the policy as it stands, but in light of the earlier gentleman who talked about high-end commercial office space and the desire for that, I'm wondering if maybe that might be something we might, in the future, reconsider as if maybe we can squeeze a little bit more out of that. With regard to the residents of the Sapphire, I'm certainly sympathetic, but I just want to relate that 20 years ago, I lived in a warehouse block west of there at 1250 Pender Street, and back then, Hastings Street was still a gravel road, if you can believe it, and there was a kind of bluff off the side, and there was skunks and all sorts of stuff. I mean, so that neighborhood has transformed. I remember what was there before the Sapphire, and that is the nature of that kind of part of town. So I'm totally sympathetic. I think this actually is a pretty adequate setback, and it probably won't be as bad as you're worried that it will be. And I think it sounds like the developers will be doing a pretty good job of trying to mitigate a lot of those impacts. Certainly with the context of the childcare, I think that's going to make it even more considered. So I'll be supporting this. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Councillor Dominato.
Thank you, and thank you to staff that work on this, but also to all of the individuals that came out and spoke to this application. I'll keep my comments brief because I think they've probably been covered off, but looking at this in the context, the policy context that we have to work within currently, and it seems to align with the existing policy context. And also looking at it from the perspective that, as our staff have outlined, there have been a number of opportunities for engagement, consultation, and so that people could provide input. But also, I think the broader consideration around this is an area that is highly focused on having office spaces. So there's that area, but also that there's a need. We know how important that is, that there's a low vacancy rate for office space and a high demand, and that it'll help fulfill that. I do want to, I think Councillor DiGenova sort of touched on this, but obviously there was an acknowledgement of the two childcares that are nearby and the accommodations that have been made, including supporting, providing funding towards a temporary relocation. I did ask about the privacy concerns, and it sounded like from what the staff response was that I think there's still an opportunity as part of the development permit process to have some further dialogue, whether there's any further changes that could be made or accommodations to address some of the concerns that the residents you have raised in terms of proximity and privacy. And I, one of the things that I guess just the last comment on this, and I'm not an architect and I have no idea if this would have been possible, but when I went on Google Maps to look at the current building and then the adjacent Sapphire where the daycare is, I wonder if there would have been an opportunity to sort of have a bridge between the buildings to sort of create a childcare within the new building and to use it, because I think I can see from the street where the outdoor spaces, play spaces for the kids in the Sapphire Childcare Center. And again, I'm not an architect, but I'm recognizing it would be great to be able to put childcare in now as opposed to waiting and put down the road. But appreciate that there is obviously significant cash contribution through this towards childcare and affordable housing in the city, and obviously subject to DCLs. But I am looking at this from the broader big picture of what we need in terms of office space in the city, and this is certainly a part of the Metro core, downtown core, where we have a number of offices now, and also very close to transit, and also for people who are living there, it's also close to work. So I will be supporting this proposal. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Councillor Carr, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Stewart. I just wanted to confirm for the record that although I had stepped out of the room, I was able to hear the speakers. So feel that I'm able to vote on the issue for having heard all the speakers and the discussion from questions from fellow councillors, which followed along many of the questions I had too, in terms of especially is this proposal following the rules, especially in terms of tower separation, and ultimately, when we buy into any place, we should know what the rules are that are surrounding in the surrounding development sites or the surrounding properties and the zoning of the area. So this definitely is a project that is consistent with the rules and regulations, the policies, and the zoning the zoning and ability to move beyond through rezoning and the guidelines for that. I am very impressed with a number of things. First of all, that we do need more office space within the downtown core. That's been well established, and thank you to the speakers for saying that. And thank you to all the speakers who came and expressed both concerns and support. We are very concerned in any kind of tower development on the shadowing impact, so I'm quite satisfied that in terms of the analysis that this has virtually no impact on the nearby park, just shadowing onto the sidewalk adjacent, and particularly impressed by the mitigation around the child care, both in terms of the relocation and the mitigation. I don't think I've ever seen such a robust set of mitigation techniques, low noise technology, shrink wrapping the site, noise barriers. I mean, it's quite considerable. So I'm very happy to, in the end, support this proposal.
Thanks so much. And that looks like that's it for council debate, so I'll call the vote. That's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, Council, as we get ready for the next, we have quite a lot of speakers, 25 speakers signed up for the next application. So I just would like to give everybody 5 minutes just to stretch your legs and everything. So could I just have a motion for a recess? Thanks very much, Councilor Dejanova, seconded Councilor Dominato. All in favor of 5 minutes? Any opposed? Okay, great. So we'll basically 7:48, 7:50, let's say. have quorum. Okay, so I'll call council back to order. And we're on to the next rezoning, which is East 22nd Avenue, Fraser Street, and East 23rd Avenue. Clerk, if you can read the application.
This is an application by Strand Development to rezone 688 East 22nd Avenue, 3811, 3891 Fraser Street, and 379 East 23rd Avenue from RT2 District to CD1 District to permit the development of a 6-story mixed-use building with commercial uses at grade and 121 market rental housing units. A height of 21 meters and an FSR of 3.28 are proposed. Since referral to public hearing, Council has received 67 pieces of correspondence in support of the application, 37 pieces of correspondence in opposition of the application, 3 pieces of correspondence dealing with other aspects of the application. This represents all correspondence received up to approximately 7 p.m. today.
Thanks very much. Just before we get to the presentation, Councillor Carr has a point of personal privilege.
Point of personal privilege. Thank you so much, Mayor Stewart. Yes, I have been advised by our legal department that I should put onto public record the fact that last Thursday, July 4th, I had been invited by MP Don Davies, plus a number of people within the neighborhood to do a walk through the Fraser Street neighborhood. And that walk started on Kingsway. We spent a lot of time there in Lower Fraser. It did actually get to the crest of a hill where the site of this application is located. And there was a beginning of comments about it, and I basically said to the group there that this was in front of public hearing and I could not entertain any discussion about that. They also gave me a handout, Fraser Street Neighborhood Committee, which is about the pace of change within the whole neighborhood. And so I did also have that copied, so it's available for the public and for fellow councillors just to as I say, put on public record that and law was quite fine with saying that I'm fine to be able to participate in this public hearing.
Great, thanks so much. Councillor Fry. Oops, sorry, I took you off the list. I'm going to put you back on here. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I was also in attendance on July 4th for a neighborhood walking tour. It was quite enjoyable. It was a pleasant day. We walked around. We looked at the entire Fraser stretch from Kingsway all the way up to King Ed. And similarly, we didn't talk about this particular project as it was before public hearing. But for the public record, I was walking around the neighborhood.
Great, thanks so much. And also, I was talking to MP Don Davies, who's here tonight, and here to speak about other issues when the topic of pace of change in the neighborhood came up. We talked about it briefly, but not specifically about this application. So, two have checked with legal, and I'm fine to hear this application and participate fully. Just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you. And now we'll go to the presentation. Scott Erdman, the rezoning planner, planning, urban design, and sustainability, here to present the application. Please go ahead. I'm just going to put your mic on. That one. There we go.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Scott Erdman, rezoning planner for this application. The site is located on the west side of Fraser Street, spanning the block between 22nd and 23rd Avenues, as noted in yellow on the map. This site is part of a 3-block stretch of Fraser that is zoned RT2, or duplex, and is immediately north of a local shopping area centered around Fraser and King Edward. 2 blocks to the north is another shopping area centered around Fraser and Kingsway. East and west of the site, the blocks are zoned RS1 and consist of single-family homes. Prince Edward Park and Livingstone Elementary and Tupper Secondary Schools are to the west. The site area is just under 3,000 square meters, with a frontage of 80.5 meters along Fraser and a lot depth of 37.2 meters. The site slopes from Fraser Street down towards the lane. The site is currently developed with 4 duplexes, and at the south end, an auto repair garage with an associated home at the rear. Within the duplexes are 8 residential units, all of them rented on short-term tenancies since April 2018. None of the tenants are eligible for the tenant relocation and protection policy, as there are rental agreements all started within less of a year from the application date. The applicant is proposing to rezone to permit the development of a mixed-use building with 121 market rental units. 42% of these units are 2, 3, and 4-bedroom units, exceeding the family room housing mix policy requirements. Ground floor commercial retail units are proposed for the southern portion of the building. A density of 3.28 FSR and a height of 21.8 meters are proposed. This application is being considered under the Affordable Housing Choices Interim Rezoning Policy, or AHC policy. The intent of this policy is to enable a variety of housing opportunities throughout the city, including market rental housing in both ground-oriented and mid-rise forms. Applications must meet the location requirements of being close to a local shopping area and on a frequent transit network as seen on the map here. The yellow star indicates the site of this application. This application meets the criteria for this policy. This map shows the locations of rezoning applications that have been made so far under the AHC policy. Since 2012, 12 projects have been approved, and there are currently 3 other projects, including this one, in stream. 2 open houses have been held with the public, one at the pre-application stage in 2017, and another one in the fall of 2018 once the application was received. Both events were well attended, with a lot of feedback shared. Comments received include support for the addition of new secured rental housing in the neighborhood, for the proposed height and massing as an appropriate design for the location, for the large amount of family units, including townhouse units, and for the addition of new commercial retail spaces. Comments with concern were around the height and neighborhood fit of the mid-rise building, around impacts to local traffic and on-street parking, and the affordability of the new units. Residents in the area have also expressed concern for the amount of new development happening along Fraser Street and the desire for a neighborhood plan. Regarding height, the building is presented as 6 stories from Fraser Street. The southern portion of the building has ground floor commercial units, and the higher ceilings for this space, combined with a 6-foot slope from Fraser down to the lane, presented an opportunity to have 2-story ground-oriented townhouses fronting the lane. Thus, a portion of the building reads as 7 stories from the lane perspective. Setbacks at the rear, above the 2nd floor and above the 4th floor, reduce the massing of the building and minimize shadow effects on neighboring properties. To help staff understand any potential impacts, a transportation assessment and management study was submitted with the application. The study demonstrated that impacts to the local neighborhood streets and traffic patterns will be minimal from this development. The application intends to meet the Vancouver parking bylaw and provide slightly more vehicle spaces than is required for a rental project of this size. In addition, the site is well served by transit with 2 frequent bus routes. All 121 units will be market rental and secured through a housing agreement for the longer of the life of the building, or 60 years. The applicants have opted to pay the full DCL. The estimated DCL payment for this project is approximately $2.4 million. These units, if approved, would contribute towards the city's Housing Vancouver targets of building 5,000 townhouses and 20,000 purpose-built rental units within the next 10 years. To respond to the pace of development in the area comments, here is a map showing recent rezoning activities, keeping in mind that the neighborhood has also experienced growth through development permit applications. Rezoning activity in the area has been taking place under a variety of council-approved citywide policies, which were developed to incentivize rental housing across Vancouver, including Rental 100, social housing, the AHC policy, and the moderate income rental housing pilot program. Moving forward, Council heard from staff today on the citywide plan, which will lay out a blueprint for the future of Vancouver's neighborhoods. Staff will be engaging with communities such as Fraserhood to examine key themes such as building more complete neighborhoods to help inform strategic direction at a citywide level. You also heard from staff today that the existing adopted area plans and citywide policies will continue to be implemented in the meantime as they reflect significant community feedback and technical analysis. These include the AHC policy and Rental 100, which advance Council's rental housing priorities. Lastly, staff's review of the city's various rental incentive programs is underway, but scheduled to be shared with an update to Council on July 23rd. A question was received at referral about school capacity and childcare in the neighborhood. This map shows the South Hamber study area, and the yellow star indicates the application site. Livingstone Elementary is the closest school to this site and was at capacity in 2018. The Vancouver School Board recently released their draft long-range facilities plan in June of 2019. One of their goals is to reduce enrollment pressure at individual schools by adjusting catchment boundaries, noting that while many schools are full, there is overall surplus capacity both in the study area and across their system as a whole. The city coordinates with the Vancouver School Board by sharing both short-term development as well as long-term land use plans on an ongoing basis to help the school board and the city with decision-making. Overall, childcare is undersupplied across Vancouver, with only 42% of the need met for full-time care for 0 to 5-year-olds. This project site is in Riley Park neighborhood, where the need for childcare spaces is particularly acute. Although it is a good location, the site and form of development proposed for this project are not conducive to the delivery of an on-site childcare. Staff are actively exploring opportunities to deliver childcare in this area of the city, as well as all other underserved areas. As announced recently, a partnership with the city, province, and other partners will be providing over 2,000 new childcare spaces across Vancouver. In conclusion, staff support this application as it meets the intent of the Affordable Housing Choices interim rezoning policy. If approved, the application would contribute 121 secured rental units, including family-oriented townhouse units, towards the city's housing goals as identified in the Housing Vancouver strategy. Thank you very much. Both the staff and applicant teams are available to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much for that. Is the applicant team here? Yep, there you are. Great, would you like to speak to this or wait for questions? Great, thank you very much. I've got a few folks on the list to ask questions, and this is the point where we ask both the staff and applicant questions. Great, so Councillor Weeb.
Yeah, a couple questions to the applicant or to the staff. Was there a consideration to utilize one of the other rental programs, Rental 100 or MERP or social housing, to meet the needs of this site?
As mentioned, there's a variety of rental housing policies which could be utilized in the neighborhood. Both AHC and Rental 100 offer different opportunities depending on the location and the existing zoning. For this site, because it's zoned RT, the opportunities for providing additional rental are greater under the AHC, which allows for higher forms, whereas if they opted for the Rental 100 program, only 4 stories would be considered here.
Okay. And in that, it talks about that it'd be permitted forms of the maximum of 6 stories. And when you look at what a 4 to 6 story is, it's 60 feet. And this one is 7 stories. And so I'm just wondering what the reasoning to allow the 7th story and what was the community benefit that was received.
Sure. So the height of the building is a combination of a few factors. One is the addition of commercial retail spaces does require higher ceiling heights for the vitality of those commercial units. Typically, we see a range of 15 to 20 feet for commercial ceiling heights, and this one is providing 19. And in addition, there is a slope on the site of 6 feet from the front down towards the back. Staff were in support of the commercial retail units as they were found to be a benefit to the neighborhood to provide additional local serving retail for the growing neighborhood.
But it doesn't slope. I mean, the back of the building is still the same level. So it's 7 full stories. Like they didn't, right? Like the slope's not actually dropping significantly.
So just to build on what Scott was discussing, Councilmember, because of the retail height, it allowed us to tuck in on the back side of that retail a 2-story townhouse on that side. So even though the overall height of the building is 61 feet, the front, the Fraser front, is 6 stories. The back is 7 stories because those townhouses are kind of tucked into that height of that commercial space, and you can see that on the model.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but when you look at it, it doesn't really slope down, and it's exactly 7. So the commercial is exactly 2 stories of residential. Like it doesn't really drop a significant amount compared to some sites we've had where the front looks like 5 stories and then it becomes 7, but it's really sloped down the hill. I don't see that as in this context. Mm-hmm. The other component is this is a really unique housing policy and something we saw on last week. And it talks about the applicant will be expected to demonstrate their ability to maximize level of affordability in the project. How has the proponent demonstrated that they'll maximize the affordability in the project?
So under the HC policy, market rate rental housing would be considered meeting the affordability criteria. And I would say that in this case, the supply is the public benefit. We certainly have looked at the pro forma provided by the applicant, and there is no land lift. So the public benefit is the market rate rental units.
But that's one component, but it does say the applicant will expected to demonstrate the ability to maximize affordability on the project. Not just say deliver rental, but it says they will demonstrate the max. They paid twice the assessed value. And so there should be an ability to deliver some affordability on a project like this. It'd be interesting to know if that pro forma can be described by the team on how that pro forma is met, hard cost, soft cost, and how it's, because for me, looking at this, it's $2 a square foot for arts, it's $25 a square foot, but it really looks like there's room to deliver affordability.
Yeah, I think from a policy perspective, we do look at the pro forma, and we have determined that there's no land lift. But I think that's a great question for the applicant, and they may be able to provide a more fulsome answer. Would that be okay?
We're just down to 15 seconds.
Okay, I'll come back. But basically, I would like to know when we went to the 7, right, extended the height, if there was an ability to get that land lift. And I'll come back.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Bly.
Thank you very much. I'd like to focus questions around the school and childcare. So that was a question that I had asked before we brought it to public hearing. So, and I appreciate the slide shared that night. Livingston was at 101% capacity, and there's a number of other schools, although because of the map is sort of so zoomed out, they look close, but they're not really that close. But you did mention catchment boundaries, and I wonder, from a planning perspective, how long does that sort of adjustment take to actually make a difference in terms of freeing up? And because to me, it sounds kind of slow, and to be quite honest. And so although I appreciate the report back, I do feel that because 42% of these units are family,
this is a significant project, whereas some we see more, less than 20% are family, 3-bedroom or more. This is 42%. So I actually feel like it's going to be more significant here than we've seen in other applications. And I wonder if you could comment further on the catchment boundary specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, so the timing of such is that it was just recently that the school board did release their long-range facilities plan, which had been underway for a number of years. And so this draft plan was just released in June. And the school board recognizes that some schools are full, but overall there is surplus capacity, and they would like to do a better job of balancing that across neighborhoods and across the city. Other than knowing that this draft plan, which identified the strategy of adjusting catchment boundaries, was just released in June, I'm not sure of their timing going forward.
Okay. So assuming this project moves ahead, let's say, we may see families moving into the neighborhood in 3 years, 2 years?
I would say just looking ahead, it's generally 3 to 4 years until a project is fully complete and occupied.
Okay, so just so I'm perfectly clear, those details in this report aren't necessarily us going to the school board talking about this application. This is more reviewing their long-range facilities report and deducing from that report this information? So,
yeah, so their report was released very recently, but in general, on a more regular, ongoing basis, that the city does meet with the school board, and we update them on different rezoning applications and developments that have been occurring since last met. And also, the city discusses more long-term plans, such as upcoming community plans and so on, with the school board, which will help to inform their decisions. And this takes place on an ongoing basis.
Okay, so not to press on this issue, but I actually think it's really important, and I'm listening for where I can hear an answer that's going to, because that's this process we're in right now is in public hearing, and I think moving 42% of these units of new families into this area with limited school options, and we're sort of, our climate 6 big moves is about walking, transit, and I just want to make sure we are I know we're really cognizant, and you guys are really working hard to make all of these adjustments with the pace of change. But this one particularly seems to stand out. So, Teresa, you're there, so please.
Did not meet specifically with the school board on this site. We can go back and do that. Still being very new here, I don't know how long that process takes. The city I was at formerly, it took a couple of years to rebalance that. We can ask those specific questions in this one. We don't have that information for you tonight, though.
Okay, that would be great. Those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've got a few questions. So is there any planning policy for this neighborhood? Or are these developments that you put up on the map, the 12, and then I think there were some more, are they just kind of all ad hoc?
So as mentioned, there's a variety of layers of citywide policy which are applicable in this location. So over time, we've seen multiple projects come up under different policies.
But any plan that has involved residents?
So there hasn't been any detailed neighborhood planning since the 2 visions were completed in 2005 and in 1998. Okay. The rental incentive programs that enable these rezonings have come about since those visions were completed.
What are the rents likely to be?
I can defer to the applicant for a bit more detail, but it's a market rent project.
So I'd like to have that. Maybe just let me ask you one more question first. So when you get a lot of market rentals in an older area, especially when there's businesses, I know there's no businesses in this site except for the auto repair, but you've got to watch out for gentrification and the loss of smaller family-owned businesses. And I see all these rezonings coming up and these new projects, and I'm wondering if anything has been done to prevent gentrification.
So again, just to comment specifically on this project, is there a way you can relate it specifically to this project, Councillor Swanson?
Well, there's the auto repair shop. Is that still operating?
So it's the auto repair shop has been sold, and we've received correspondence from their previous owners that they have since opened a new expanded location in Burnaby as a result.
Okay, so there's no auto repair shop going to be there anymore?
No.
Okay. Yeah, could I ask the applicant about the rents?
Please, yeah, come on up.
Hello.
Please go ahead. Just state your name and then...
My name is Riley Marie. I'm Vice President of Development at Strand, the applicant.
Thank you.
So the rents in the building will be the market rents at the time of completion. Generally speaking, they'll be comparable to the average rents for the east side of Vancouver released in CMHC's report.
So give me a number.
For studios, approximately 1,500, one bedrooms, 2,000, two bedrooms, 2,600, three bedrooms, 3,300. Just pretty much in line with those averages.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Boyle.
Thanks. I also had questions around school capacity, so happy to hear more on that. I'm curious also about potential for childcare in the space, looking ahead at 3 or 4 years for families to move in, and knowing, as you identified, that we have this funding commitment for more sites. I'm wondering if staff have had a chance to look at any potential sites to identify in that neighborhood, or what the plan and timeline might be for having childcare spaces that line up with families moving in.
So regarding this site, staff who work in social policy have confirmed that this particular location would not be suitable for childcare itself. But they have indicated that they are looking at opportunities that arise. Of course, the big issue is finding sites, so acquiring land. And this is an issue not just in this neighborhood, but across the city. And so they're currently exploring opportunities as funding and as sites arise.
I just wanted to add to that as well. Whenever we have development in any part of the city, one of our highest priorities is looking for the opportunities for on-site public benefits. And childcare is one of those. So childcare is a very high priority. And so as we see development happen, we'll always assess it to see if childcare could be a fit on that site.
Okay, thanks. I'm also curious, and forgive me if I missed this in the report, the size of the commercial spaces. I know in some land assembly developments like this, what we see are big box retails, and that's doesn't feel in the spirit of the neighborhood. So I'm just curious to hear if there's anything being done on that front.
Sure. I can answer part of the question, and then maybe I might defer to the applicant for some additional details. So within the application itself, it's approximately just over 10,000 square feet of commercial space proposed. As the application has shown, it's currently broken down into what could be 3 different commercial retail units, including a restaurant. At this stage of the project, detailed design work around that hasn't taken place, and nor have they sought any tenants at this point. The intent of the space is to offer flexibility in size and design as the project would move forward into the DP stage.
Okay, and do we have a way as a condition to ensure that it's broken up into at least 3 units and that it doesn't become, say, a no frills or some dollar store? Not to target any company in particular?
Yes, thanks.
if you look at the plan, there is actually has the opportunities to open the door to the street sidewalk. And this actually is a very flat street. So it's very easy to split the whole commercial space into small commercial units, which could be, has the frontage range from 20 to 40, which is very suitable for small local business.
Okay, I guess my question is, in potentially approving this, do we, as council, have any way of ensuring that it is broken up, knowing it's easier for developments to sign one big commercial lease?
Yeah, that's going to be resolved during the DP stage. I think this we definitely can put conditions to the DP at the DP stage.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I think, what we do is from a design perspective, have a small frontage and then leave the flexibility to the developer and to the market, what kind of a retail tenant there would be, whether it's 3 or 1. But I think this is certainly something that if council wanted to put it forward a condition to have a minimum size of, or maximum size of, 10,000 divided into 2 or 3, like 5,000 or something like that. I think we can definitely, through this hearing, we can definitely talk to the applicant about that.
Okay. Thanks so much. And that's the 5 minutes. Councillor Dejanova?
Yes, I have a point of information. I appreciate and I've wondered and asked the same type of questions that were just asked, but it's my understanding that the council can't specifically ask the applicant to have a certain type of store in there. We obviously have bylaws that preclude certain types of uses. And just from staff's answer, I was concerned that perhaps I've been told this at other public hearings. So does this just apply newly if we were to break that into different amounts of square footage? Perhaps I could get an answer back on that later on. My point of information is it legally jeopardizing the process to be prescribing and talking about what specific types of stores, such as big box stores or local stores, would be going into this development? That's not what I see before us here. So
right. My thought is just an example we were looking at, but I could refer to staff.
Legally, I just wanted to ask the question.
Are those questions still within the boundaries of what we can talk about?
Yeah,
at the public
I don't think it would be illegal. I mean, I think we didn't put that forward to allow the flexibility of the market to determine that. So it's something that I would like to see if the applicant would like to comment on.
Okay, thank you.
But we don't comment on points of information, so we'll, but I've got you in the queue, so perhaps you can.
In order, that's what I know.
Yep,
So
we're good. Okay, thanks. On to Councillor Fry.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So similar to Councillor Boyle's questions, I am a little concerned about the retail frontage. I'm zooming in a bit on the urban design panel comments here, where they talk about the depth of commercial space tends to larger retail, and they suggest opening the door to smaller retails. Similarly, they talk about looking at transitions and thinking about the neighborhood and its surroundings. They comments that the street frontage needed some calming or something to that effect. To what degree are we taking this urban design panel advice and mitigating the sort of street impacts? I guess is question one. And do we have a comprehensive plan for the larger neighborhood? Because I feel like there's a lot of land assemblies going on. There's a lot of simultaneous projects going on. And I don't know if this is all knit together as a really comprehensive view of what we're doing. And certainly when I see the comments from the UDP here, how do we respond to UDP comments in this application?
That question would seem to be right along the lines of what we're asking for. We did have in the presentation, we did have kind of an outline of what was going on in the neighborhood, but we had heard earlier that there's older plans, but not current plans. So again, I'm just trying to zoom in just on this project, and your first question is certainly in
specifically from the UDP on this.
That's fine, absolutely fine. That one's fine.
Yeah.
I think maybe I just want to go back to the community vision. So this Fraser Street is right on the border between the Riley Park, South Canby community vision, and then the Kensington Cedar Cottage, KCC Cedar Cottage. I think if anything that both visions speak very strongly to is for Fraser Street to have a very vibrant retail local serving nodes. And so certainly is something that staff trying to encourage in all of our development, whether it's development permit application or rezoning application, to have an active retail at grade. And can you just repeat the urban design panel question?
Well, there was a number of urban design panel comments. One of the comments was that they were asking to look at transitions and think about the neighborhood and its surroundings. They were concerned about the depth of commercial space tending towards larger retail and wanted to leave the door open for smaller retails. And I think those are thoughtful comments from our UDP, who are, this is their job, and we appreciate their input on that kind of stuff. So I'm just wondering how much this is going to, the UDP comments will influence the next phase as we go forward towards adding conditions for design panel, say, or a development permit.
Yeah, I think I would like to hear when is appropriate time to the applicant to speak to, you know, maybe their interests already, maybe they have a retail tenant already. I'd like to hear from them. But certainly the urban design panel comments will definitely be incorporated. We'll definitely make sure that, you know, we do have a design condition to look at, you know, ensure the retail vibrancy and then small local serving retail tenants in the area.
Okay, and I just would like to highlight that other comment about breaking down of the streetscape that could be a little calmer, according to the UDP. And I think those are all really relevant comments. And I appreciate that I can't speak larger about the neighborhood, but at least as far as the UDP is concerned on this particular application, I think they're relevant and cogent.
I do think you can speak about the larger neighborhood, just kind of contained to what was in the presentation around that area where they showed the different developments along the street.
Okay, well, I mean, so I guess I'll leave it at that and we'll continue on.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Carr.
Yes, thanks very much. I have 3 questions, and they really all relate to the interim rezoning policy for affordable housing choices. So my first question is around the intent of this policy, and I'm just quoting from it. The intent is to encourage innovation and enable real examples of ground-oriented and mid-rise affordable housing types to be tested for potential wider application. What is it about this project that is innovative that we want to test to see if it might have wider application?
So when the policy was introduced, it was meant to really test the market. At that time, there wasn't a lot of variety and not a lot of people actually building rental. And so I think, we've seen community land trust development, we've seen other like co-housing, we've seen senior life lease building. And what we also see that this policy is delivering a product which is market rental in area where there is currently no rental 100 policy or other policy to deliver rental.
Okay. Okay, my second question is around affordability. And again, I'm quoting from the policy. Projects must demonstrate an enhanced level of affordability beyond that provided through the delivery of a generally more affordable housing type alone. So if the housing type is just rental, what is the enhanced level of affordability beyond being just rental at market rate? I mean, how do you as staff look at that?
I think with some of the AHC policy that have been before you, the affordability criteria is defined as the housing tenure. So the rental tenure is more affordable than ownership.
Right. Yes, I've seen that in many reports over the years. Okay, I'm looking at a disconnect in terms of where it says, and again in the policy, projects that would be considered must meet one of the following affordability criteria. So it's got to meet the criteria. In this case, it's 100% of the residential floor spaces rental housing. But I'm reading that policy to say that it's beyond that type of housing, which is rental, because it talks about other kinds too, like community land trust models and that kind of thing. But beyond just being rental, it talks about an enhanced level of affordability. And so, and I can leave it there with you, but we can come back to it maybe at the end, but that is a concern of mine. The third question that I have has to do with, in the policy, it also talks about spacing requirements. No more than 2 projects within 10 blocks. I'm assuming that means 2 projects under this particular housing, affordable housing program, not cumulative in terms of Rental 100, MERP, and this program. It's just this program?
That's correct.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Councillor Carr?
For now.
Thanks very much. Councillor Dejanova. Or sorry, Dominato.
I'm getting used to it.
2 days in a row. That's right.
2 Ds, 2 Italian names. Just a couple of quick questions. Would it have been possible to have the applicant do this under the Rental 100 program as it stands today?
So they could have submitted an application for this site under Rental 100. However, the provisions for the amount of housing or the height and density is less than what the provisions of AHC offer.
Okay. And then, and I know we'll be hearing from speakers shortly, but just also some questions around the, in terms of the fit with the neighborhood. I don't believe this neighborhood has a formal neighborhood plan, as we've seen in some other neighborhoods, for like the West End, for example, Grandview Woodlands, and how this fits with policy, given that there is that. I think there's a vision statement, but I'm just curious if you could speak to that.
So the divisions were developed at a time where the rental affordable housing crisis is not at the same level as it is today. And the divisions do speak to providing opportunities to strengthen the local shopping areas. One of the 2 also speaks directly to providing new housing opportunities along arterials near shopping as an opportunity to do so. Since that time, these rental incentive programs, which are a citywide lens and are location-specific, have been developed. And so thus, all the projects that we've seen come forward as applications are under these citywide programs.
Okay, and so just to be clear from that is, and sorry, I'm working around, is that, so we do take into consideration those existing neighborhood vision statements in terms of what was articulated. Recognizing that some of those are dated. I live in a neighborhood where we have quite a dated one, but that is considered as part of these applications.
Yeah, so on balance, staff do take into consideration all the policies which are applicable to a site, both older ones as a basis and newer ones that have come along since.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Dejanova.
Thank you very much. Just further to the questions about schools. I understand the school board, it's their responsibility along with the provincial government if they're looking to purchase land or build a new school. And in fact, the school board does have assets and ways of moving forward with that. Is that correct? So that's not necessarily a responsibility of the City of Vancouver. So although we do look at appropriate housing with where we place, appropriate schools where we place family housing, the school board also has to look at the density in the neighborhood and the need for new schools. Is that correct? Because I kind of had heard before that it was more a City of Vancouver responsibility. So I just want to make sure that that I'm correct to know that they do own property, have assets. They could purchase land or work with the province to do that, to open a new school in an area that's densified and has more family housing.
Yeah, that's correct. I think it is definitely VSB's responsibility. What we have said in our presentation is that City of Vancouver has an ongoing working relationship with VSB in terms of population projection and growth in certain area, and what additional people we're bringing in the area, and so that they can do their long-term planning.
Okay, thank you. And then to the question of the rents, and I heard about that, and perhaps I'm going to ask this question now, but I'm not going to put you on the spot. Maybe just if there's some information that you could bring back afterwards. I'm particularly interested to know, it's my experience and my background and, non-market housing, and working in that field, that the most affordable housing is the housing not that we necessarily build today, but it'll be affordable in 25 years. And that's kind of or obviously a future to that. But 25 years, buildings in good repair, good shape still, but the rent's gone down as you would see with older stock. So I'm just wondering, if we don't build today the target of units that we need, are we going to see that influence families and housing in Vancouver? And I think about that in the context of this project, because it's a whole bunch of projects that are going to help us meet that target. So if you could maybe project what the rents would be in like 25 years, if there's a way to do that, or look at what we could expect given current market circumstances, or how affordable we think they'd be on the scale of affordability, since that was a question asked before, I'd really appreciate some kind of answer to that.
I think we can probably look into that a little bit, but I think just on principle, I can definitely confirm that new builds are higher end units because they're brand new, and over time they depreciate and they provide more affordable rents. And so, we're talking about 121 rental housing units.
And just to confirm, and I think that this is obvious, but all older units were once new units, correct?
That is correct. I think in a lot of ways, Vancouver's situation is today we're playing more than a little bit of catch up for such an extended period of not building rental. The city's rental policies we have now came about within the last few years to try and turn the dial and incentivize new rental to be built, recognizing that as part of the housing spectrum of diverse tenures, you need to have new supply added over time, as older buildings at some point do eventually reach the end of their economic life.
Okay, I'm not sure that we're as far behind as Burnaby, but thank you very much for that. In looking at family housing and the rents that the applicant had described earlier, does this meet with our goals? I mean, I see in the policy report that it meets several of the City of Vancouver's policies, but also on the making room for families policy. I understand that it says council authority previous decisions, but in looking at the context of family housing, is this going to make a significant impact in the neighborhood for this type of housing?
Yes. So in 2016, the City Council approved a policy called Making Room, and that came about recognizing that a lot of new development, both strata and rental, was prioritizing perhaps one bedrooms and smaller units. So in order to encourage more rental units, the city added requirements for 2 and 3 bedroom units in new developments in order to add that much needed housing supply to the city. Under that policy, they required that 35% of the units be family housing. This project is providing a 42%.
Just a point of information, it is because it's not listed here under council authority or previous decisions, the making room policy, and perhaps we could get a yellow memo on that if it's not.
Sorry, as a correction to myself, it was the family room policy, not the making room policy.
Okay,
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure.
Very much.
Thank you.
My mistake.
On to Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thank you. A lot of my questions have been asked on affordability and otherwise, so I'll just try to be brief and focus in. On the commercial piece, and I just want to go back to that a little bit with the 11,032 square feet of commercial space at grade, and I wonder if this is the time we're permitted to ask questions through staff of the applicant. I'm wondering if there's any commentary from the applicant about their vision for that space, given very sensitive to retaining the character of local neighborhoods and given the increasing challenges for small businesses to sustain in the city with the cost of leasing and property tax. So I guess I'm asking if there's any information that they'd like to share at this time around their vision for tenancies.
Sure. I will defer to the applicant to respond to your question.
And also on that question, the other part being that it can really add value to the residential itself in terms of appeal.
Yeah. So I'll perhaps answer this question and tie it into some of the other discussion regarding the retail spaces before. So the retail spaces are actually quite shallow So I don't know where that comment came from the urban design panel, but one of the outcomes of introducing residential uses on the ground floor along the lane is that it made the commercial units shallower. And for smaller tenants, long and deep units are generally not good because the space at the back is not necessarily space that you can showcase from the street. So we've attempted to minimize the depth of the retail units, and looking at an elevation of the building is actually broken into 4 separate store frontages, each with their own garage door that can be rolled up so that the units can be opened up to the street. And the units themselves are quite set back from the property line, and so the intention there was to try to create outdoor activity. So the goal is to attract small tenants. We've spoken to some. There's a, call it a neighborhood grocer who's interested in approximately 2,000 square feet. There's been some interest from coffee shops. It's very preliminary, and generally we wouldn't start formally marketing a project this early. Yeah, does that answer?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. And I'll move on to a second question, just so I know we want to get to speakers. It's really a question around Appendix B, and this might be, staff might want to comment on this. And I'm looking at page 1 of 15, and it's really about sort of urban design and the conditions of approval that speak specifically to increasing the indoor and outdoor amenity spaces commensurately with the number of units, and it suggests that that could be achieved either through increased spaces at ground level or providing amenity space on the 6th floor, the contiguous outdoor roof deck. So I wonder if you can give us a bit more color on that and where the concern is and how you visualize what the nature of the discussion's been around how that could be achieved.
Look at the proposed amenity rooms right now. It's around 400 square feet, maybe 600 square feet, and we're considering the 121 units. So considering this is a little bit smaller than what the on-site residents lease. So what I imagine is should be about double the size, which at ground floor, they probably need to take off another units besides it to combine together as an amenity room. And the amenity space outside, also in front of that units, also can be dedicated for the common amenity space, outdoor space. That's the one option. So we also suggest another option is on the rooftop, which is on the northern roof deck above the 6th story, which is able to have the outdoor open space on the roof deck. Also, be able to locate indoor amenity rooms on the southern portion, which can be co-located both amenity spaces.
So can I just ask a clarification question on that then? So what is actually confirmed for outdoor space or roof deck now? Is there, I just want to be clear, is there any, or is that suggesting an expansion?
What I suggest is 2 options. One is expansion, which is considering on the ground floor.
How many, when you say expansion, how much is there now? Do we know?
Right now, what they have, you mean the indoor, outdoor?
The outdoor.
Outdoor right now, I count about probably 800 to 1,000 square feet right now.
Okay, and if they chose that option, is
what we're expecting is about 1,400 square feet, which quite in line with our another design guidelines for the high density for family units.
Okay, and then that would be determined through the process.
We're at the 5 minutes. I can put you back on the list if you like.
Okay, thanks.
Great. I have a couple questions. I'll start my timer there. So what else can be built here? What's the, we've got the houses that have been assembled. What else can be built here besides this building?
Under the existing RT2 sites, there's duplexes on site now, and so that's the limit of the existing site is a duplex 2-family home use.
Okay, thanks. And so we were talking about rent levels, and maybe this is a question to the applicant. We've been told that a 1-bedroom is just. Could you go over the rent levels again? Sorry, to the applicant.
And I'll defer to the applicant to respond to that question.
Thanks very much. Yep.
So again, the rents will be set at the time of completion and when what the rents are then, but our estimate today is that the rents would be approximately $1,500 for a studio, $2,000 for a 1, $26 for a 2, and $33 for a 3.
Right. And do you have just if we're thinking, we don't use that word affordable anymore, but what is it? Basically, a third of income is what we're looking at as affordable. So in your mind, what kind of salary level is needed to rent, say, a 1-bedroom apartment here?
So as I understand it, a third number is based off of gross income. So
Right. Yeah,
if a 1-bedroom's $2,000 a month, that would equate to $24,000 a year, and if you times that by 3, it would be about $75,000 per year for a household.
Right, and that's kind of an average salary of a police officer or nurse or something about that level.
As I understand it, yeah.
Okay, right. And how many of those kind of the studios and the 1-bedrooms? How many are in there?
If you just give me a sec, I can flip to project statistics. So we have 10 studios, 61 bedrooms, 35 2-bedrooms, 15 3-bedrooms, and or 14 3-bedrooms and 2 4-bedrooms.
Okay, that's good. Thanks very much. On to the second round. I think Councillor Weep, you had another.
2 quick ones.
Okay.
The natural assets described in the report talk about the urban forest strategy, and we have 5 trees that meet that standard on the site, and we're only keeping 1 and providing no new trees. So I'm just wondering, this is the first project we've seen that has decreased the number of trees on site. I'm just wondering why that's seen, because normally we're always looking to expand urban forest cover.
So on the site currently, there are 5 trees, one of which is a sizable specimen that we sought to retain, and so the building has been set back and the parkade has been notched in order to retain a large western red cedar at the southwest corner. The other 4 mature trees on site vary in health, and most are not in the most ideal healthy condition. Also, their current location is within the building footprint of the new proposal.
But we're not looking at replacement trees on site.
There are additional trees through the landscaping plan to be included along 22nd Avenue.
Okay, and the report shows that no new ones will be added. Second, the heritage component hasn't really been brought up today, and there's an opportunity here if we are getting this to be more fit with character. Has there been, and it talks about the modest design featuring vernacular design elements of the Alex Automotive, and we heard the proponent talk about sliding doors for the 4 units. Was there an element to bring some of the elements of the current Alex Automotive, which has been there 95 years, to the design of the building?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, our heritage staff recognize this has the old buildings on site before, but they don't think we really need to looking for some kind of some kind of memorize those things by build the new elements on the new buildings. But actually, this building design volunteered to provide some architecture expressions which memorize those heritage characters on site before. I probably leave this for applicants to describe what kind of detailed architecture expressions they're trying to incorporate into this overall architecture design.
Yeah, so in terms of what we're thinking to commemorate the existing service station, so if you look at the street frontage drawing of the building there, we're using colors that are actually quite similar to the existing service station. So the idea was to use building colors and materials that express character of the station. So that's part of it. Preserving a commercial use on the site was also sort of incidentally something that preserved that character. Once the building's completed, Other aspects that we'd like to include is a commemorative plaque that talks about Alex Automotive and the Borden family that owned it. As I mentioned, there's a color palette that incorporates it, and the materiality of the retail component with the garage doors, that's a direct kind of ode to Alex Automotive. And we're also planning on naming the project either after Alex Automotive or the family as another way to recognize their place in the neighborhood.
Because it looks like there's an opportunity to have created that garage feeling patio for a restaurant on the corner and really kind of brought that element to the building. And in this innovative, which I think Councillor Carr brought up, innovative policy, it'd be really interesting to see what could have been done with the sign, because I think that that's an element that to really pay homage to what was there.
Sure, yeah.
Thanks. Okay, that's it for council questions. And just remember, this is your one chance to kind of ask questions to applicant. So if you have any more questions for the applicant, you better ask them now. Otherwise, we'll go to the public speakers list. So we have 25 speakers signed up for tonight, and we may not get through them all tonight. I'm just going to keep an eye on the clock. We've got till 10 o'clock this evening, so I'll just let people know. But if you think there's, we might get through, if we're lucky, 15 speakers maybe. So I'll just go through the list of who is in the first 15. Karim Windsor, Alex Hemingway, Michelle Segal, Lynn Werner, John Werner, Daniel Olksiuk, Nick Caligaros, Don Davies, Aline Rawling, Lucas Berube, Stefan Krepovich, Michael Buchan, Adam Gailey, Todd Hickling, and Martina Lee. We're going to try to get through you for 15, and then if we need to, we would come back. Clerks, when is the 6 p.m. on Thursday would be for the rest of the speakers and decision? 3 p.m. on Thursday, sorry. We'll just double check that. So we haven't decided yet. Well, can you guys decide and just get back to me? It's in my script. Okay, I'll come back to you on that. So I'm going to go by the clerk, 6 p.m. on Thursday. So can we start with Karim Windsor? And you have up to 5 minutes, and just if you could also support or oppose, and you may have questions, so please go ahead.
Sure. My name's Karim Windsor. I live at 826 East 23rd. So I live a block from the proposed development. I've got 2 kids. I've got a 5-year-old who's going to be going to the annex, and I've got a 10-year-old going to the main school, Charles Dickens. I support this project for 3 or 4 reasons. I used to acquire land for developers to build rental housing. I did that for a decade. I can tell you it's brutally hard to find a site in Vancouver that you can actually build on that makes any sense. I actually wasn't able to in 10 years, so either you're lucky or you take on a lot of risk. So it's very challenging to find rental locations. And that being, this is a great location. You got a bus route going along King Edward to the SkyTrain station. You've got a bus route, the number 8 Fraser, going downtown. It's super central if you're a renter, if you're a biker, if you have kids that are going to school. So I think it's a great location, and it's right next to a lot of amenities at Fraser and King Edward. The second reason I like the project is because I've lived in Kitts, I've lived in Fairview, I've lived in Kerrisdale, and Fraser, I hate to say this in front of my neighbors, it's a bit dead. There's not a lot going on. There's literally no foot traffic other than at 3 o'clock when the kids are going to 7-Eleven, or lunchtime when they're going to 7-Eleven. So I think we need more density, we need more foot traffic. A lot of the retail along Fraser, you can take 26 and Fraser, you had Escobars that went under, and then you had Bukowski's, I can't remember the name, and now you have a third one in like 5 years that are rotating through. So you have a lot of businesses at Fraser and King Edward, Fraser and 26, that don't do very well because there's just not a lot of activity in the area. So I think having 121 new units is going to bring more vibrancy into the area, more foot traffic into the area, and it's going to help the local businesses. I think it's going to help the local businesses prosper. I don't think it's going to be a detriment to them. I think we can't all deny that we've got a housing crisis, and the longer we delay or the longer we postpone building more rental housing, it's going to get worse. So I think we've got a proponent here. They're building 121 units. They're building rental housing. They're building it in a great location. I think we should support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And there's no questions, so that's fine. Thanks for coming in tonight. We have Alex Hemingway, number 2, and then Michelle Segal, number 3 after that.
Hi, councillors. Thanks for your attention tonight. I know you've had a long day of meetings. My name's Alex Hemingway. I'm speaking in support of these homes, and I live a few blocks away from the proposed development, and I'm a renter in that neighborhood. I'm a lifelong renter, actually, and I want to tell you a little bit about my experience as a renter in this area and in the city. So I'm a renter of a secondary suite. I live in the attic suite of 330 square foot attic suite of a 100-year-old house, because that's the kind of the state of things in this city. Is not really appropriate to my household or to my partner and I, but that's the situation. And as you know, and I hope you'll have heard many times over many hearings, living as a secondary suite renter is a very insecure situation. We're always 2 months away from a potential eviction notice. My landlords are lovely people. They have small children who could use that space, so we could be out anytime. I've been in this neighborhood for 9 years, in the region for 17 years, and I've felt that insecurity of secondary suite rental very acutely. There are 3 suites in my house. That's probably not quite legal, but that's not my problem. Last year, all 3 of the units were being rented out last year. All 3 of us received eviction notices when the house was sold. I managed to finagle my way out of that, but 2 other households were displaced from the neighborhood. And the reason I mention all this is simply to emphasize how badly we need secure rental homes in this neighborhood. There are very few rental homes in the neighborhood to begin with, and even fewer secure purpose-built rental homes. We need them. We're in a situation where renters, not just in this area, but around the city, are facing the consequences of an abysmally low vacancy rate. That's like a vice that's being turned on us constantly. We see it in the upward pressure on rents from that low vacancy rate, but we also feel it in our day-to-day interactions with the landlords. Our bargaining power as tenants, as renters, is very diminished as a result of that low vacancy rate. I'm very aware of my rights as a renter, and quite up on all these policy issues. But even in that situation, I agreed to an illegally high rent increase to stay in my home last year, because that's the reality when you don't have a serious outside option as a renter. To the point of affordability, of course, we would all like to see market rents in this city be lower, and I think that should be an objective. I think we should keep in mind that things like secondary suites are also market rentals, and we seem to understand reasonably straightforwardly that if we eliminated a bunch of the secondary suite rentals in the city versus them continuing to exist, that would be detrimental to renters. We seem to understand when we regulate things like Airbnb to bring new market rentals online for people to rent, that is a benefit to renters. And I would hope that we can see that the exact same logic applies when we're considering whether to bring 121 new rental units into existence versus simply not have them exist at all. And, I would just mention that I'm also a huge supporter of non-market housing. I think you can do a lot more on that front. And if I had more time, I would get into that. But that's not happening right now. And every set of new homes that's blocked or delayed or has floors cut off of them in terms of new rental proposals means someone like me without a home and a turn of that vice grip on renters all over the city. So I really hope you'll support these new homes. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time. There's no questions, so appreciate you coming in tonight. Thanks very much. Michelle Siegel and then Lynn Werner. Please go ahead whenever you like, and if you could speak on the mic, that'd be great.
My name is Michelle Siegel. I live in a laneway duplex on the other side of Fraser Street from the location of this rezoning. I'm a member of the Fraser Street Neighborhood Coalition, which is a group of neighbors who live near Fraser Street and who are working together to stay informed on and respond to the significant changes proposed to our neighborhood. The coalition does not support this rezoning, and we believe that this position is representative of the majority of residents of this neighborhood. This belief is based on the community support that we have encountered since the formation of our coalition. We have around 200 neighbors who are members of our listserv. We also have 540 signatures on a petition that I will present to City Council at the end of this presentation. This petition asks for development in our community to be considered in the context of a comprehensive plan. We believe this petition represents a strong consensus of the Fraser Street neighborhood. It hasn't been easy to figure out what is actually proposed for our neighborhood. But after about a year of research, essentially I understand that the proposals are a hub of all rental 7 to 14 story buildings around Kingsway and Fraser. You've heard already that there are 11 rezonings in the pipeline for this area, which amounts to over 1,200 new rental units. The problem is that despite the fact that all of these rezonings are currently underway, each rezoning is considered entirely without consideration of this larger context and is presented to our community as if each is one single rezoning and not part of a wholesale change to the makeup of our neighborhood. The 11 rezonings are being brought under 4 different rezoning policies which encourage rental-only buildings by providing incentives to developers. These rezoning proposals, including the one before council tonight, are not a good bargain for our community or for the city as a whole. The developers are getting huge incentives to build rental, but market rental buildings are for-profit ventures. They are not a public service. The incentives to developers under these rezoning policies include waiver of CACs, in some cases DCLs, and dramatic upzonings. The rezoning application before council tonight is for 121 units on a site where there is currently 8 rental homes. Tonight's rezoning applicant will pay no CACs, even though the building proposed will be entirely market rental. The combined effect of the waiver of CACs and the dramatic increase in density means that our community will have thousands of new residents without any increase in community amenities or services. This is a community that already uses our public services intensively. The public schools that are most affected by these developments are Livingston, Dickens, and McBride, all of which are over capacity. The planning department did not meet with the school board, but I did. I met with Janet Fraser, who's the chair of the Vancouver School Board, because this neighborhood is identified by the VSB in the report that came out this summer as a crisis area because there isn't space in nearby school catchments. So adjustment of school catchment areas will not accommodate these children. That was what I understood from my meeting with Janet Fraser. Adding housing where there are no public school spaces will not improve affordability or livability for families. This same principle applies to daycare. There is a WCA daycare just down the block from this proposed development, and my daughter has been on the list for that daycare for years. There are 13 and 14-story towers proposed for the properties directly beside both the Mount Pleasant Family Center and the South Community Birth Program. The Family Center has been in our neighborhood for almost 40 years and runs drop-in programs for families and refugees and is in desperate need of an upgraded facility. The developer has told the Family Center that it will pay $4,500 over 3 years. This is to the center to support their programs. This is totally insufficient and not even enforceable. The South Community Birth Program is one of the first community-based midwives clinics in Canada, and it has to turn away applicants from its prenatal classes because the classes are often full. Any of these sites are on public property and could be expanded to provide daycare with some additional funding. Even if we accept that densification without CACs is an acceptable bargain if it encourages building rental homes, it is unacceptable for our neighborhood to be singled out to carry so much of the burden of this bargain. My final point on the topic of CACs is that the entire process lacks transparency because even City Council isn't allowed to verify the developer's claims that they can't afford to pay CACs. This encourages developers to overpay for real estate and then go to City Council for what is essentially a bailout when the business risk that they have taken turns out to be insufficiently profitable. The fact that a developer has made a bad business decision because they overestimated the upzoning that would be approved should not be a factor driving the decision of whether a rezoning application is appropriate.
Thanks so much. You're at your 5 minutes, but you do have some questions. So I've got Councillor Fry.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Ms. Siegel. So I just want to paint a little bit of context because we have to make these decisions based on existing policy, and the interim housing choices policy doesn't include CAC, but it does include DCLs. So there is, according to the documents, there's $2.6 million in public benefits that'll be coming from this particular project, which could theoretically go towards childcare and other community amenities. Given, and I 100% hear what you're saying about the land descent and the concurrent applications that are going on, and I agree with you that that's a bit overwhelming and it needs a comprehensive plan. But as we have to make a decision based on the existing policies that we have, and considering that this meets the policy objectives for the most part and actually is delivering $2.6 million in public benefits, is this possibly the lesser of given that some of the other applications theoretically will not be paying DCLs or CACs, is this less bad?
Excuse me.
That was it.
My understanding is that the developments that have the DCLs waived have to provide actual affordable housing like rent-controlled apartments, not just market rental. So that's why they're getting the DCLs waived. And
not under this policy.
Not under this policy. But, I mean, to make a distinction, I understand that you have to consider the buildings depending on the policy that it's brought under. But for us as residents, we're looking at it as a whole rather than on the individual policy that this building is being brought under.
And so, I hear that message loud and clear. I'm just wondering if this is less bad because it's giving $2.6 million.
Well, I don't know where those DCLs are going to go, and I don't understand there to be any guarantee that they'd be spent in our neighborhood as opposed to downtown where there's already childcare expansion proposed. I don't know where that money's going to go, and we don't expect, because there's no accountability on this, that would be spent in our neighborhood, and there's no proposal to spend that money in our neighborhood.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Dejanova, please.
Thank you very much. When you had made a comment, and I tried to write all of it down, but you said that in giving these CACs or in waiving the CACs for market development, that we shouldn't do that because it's market rental. But what we're hearing more and more, and we have a housing update in December, is that it is a problem for mostly what's described as the missing middle, but it's also for seniors, and looking at building that housing stock and keeping up with that housing stock, as I'd asked staff that question before, so that we don't have sort of luxury housing, and then we have only shelter rate housing. We have some type of middle housing. I'm not saying that shelter rate housing isn't important also. So what is it that you do feel, and in the context of this project, our duty is? Because I don't own this land. This is the project that's in front of me. And as we have learned before at public hearing, if council were to say no to this, we can't prescribe what is going to be built on that land. I think everyone's figured that out. I hope.
I would hope that City Council's duty would be to consider whether this building benefits the people who would potentially live in the building and the surrounding neighborhood, and whether it's responsible for the livability and affordability of the neighborhood long term to approve this building in the context of the many other buildings that are also being considered. So I'm not telling you that you can prescribe, but I hope that the City Council's only means to consider development is to approve what's put before them. There must be an opportunity to refuse to approve some of these proposals as well. Whether you can prescribe what's there or not, you can certainly send messages to the development community and to the city what will be approved and what is appropriate.
Well, I won't get into that because it's question period, but it's my understanding, and I can check with staff. But we can't prescribe, we can't tell someone what to do on their land. We can tell them they can't do something, but then again, they have to go back to the drawing board, and that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars for them to bring a new project back. Or in fact, we have a situation where, they've just gated up the land and it's completely empty. We have that down at 105 Kiefer, I think, actually. So that's what I understand. So just my questions within understanding the context of this project, and schools definitely are an issue that has come up in the correspondence and in comments tonight. You had mentioned that you had met with the school board trustee, with Trustee Janet Fraser. Did she talk to you about the school board's responsibility to also provide schools and the assets they have, or the ways that they would work with the city to try and make sure that there are new schools built? Also, considering we have a school tax that has been implemented, I'm just wondering if that's a consideration.
I'm glad that you asked me about my meeting with Janet Fraser, because I want to talk about the degree to which there in fact is a relationship between the planning department and the Vancouver School Board. Because what I heard from Janet Fraser is that the school board receives a report of developments approved. There's no, as far as I understand, real back and forth in the discussion about what neighborhoods can withstand more families. And there are neighborhoods in this city that have lots of school spaces where there are not developments like this proposed. And so I hope that it's possible for the city council to consider things like that. I'm told that the city planning department and the school board are, that it's not a responsibility of the city. Well, these are residents that you are making decisions about their futures and the kids that are going to live in that neighborhood. And so I think that it has to be a consideration whether you can build a new school or not.
Okay. Did you know that we have a citywide planning process that actually we discussed this morning, and hopefully we'll make a decision on tomorrow? But the school board came up, and hopefully in that process we'll be able to do that. But were you aware of that?
I was aware of that, and I
have to ask questions. So
yeah, I am aware of that. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. I am very cautiously optimistic about that, because I see that the developments in our neighborhood will be well underway before the citywide plan has any impact on what happens in our neighborhood.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. And one last question from Councillor Kirby.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. I appreciate all your comments. I was also going to ask a similar question, Councillor Fry, so I'll skip over that just to clarify that there are some DCLs coming in public benefit. But I guess my question is, if you're not supportive of this development, what would you prefer to see on this site? What would you imagine would happen if council hypothetically said no to it?
Okay, well, I'm glad you asked that question, because what I would like to see is a consideration of the neighborhood as a whole. And rather than rezoning block by block, that we would have a plan where we have 4 or 5 story buildings that run up and down Fraser Street with small commercial spaces for local businesses and townhouses and a path for pedestrians and cyclists in the lane behind Fraser Street. The lanes could be somewhere for new and existing residents to meet, with parks and community gardens. I'm in favor of one-way traffic and lowered speed limits in the lane to foster that kind of community behind the Fraser Street developments that are inevitably coming to our neighborhood.
Okay, so quick follow-up on that. So you said you're in favor of 4 or 5 stories, so this is 7. So is it the massing that's also a concern here? Is that what I'm hearing? Because it
So
also did say, and it was helpful for the applicant, just to finish that question quickly, that they kind of clarified that there was 4 specific storefronts with roll-up windows, and so perhaps there's a vision for smaller space. So it doesn't sound. It sounds more that it's the scale that is different from what you're describing.
So you can categorize my concern about densification as just about height, which makes it seem one particular way.
And to be clear, I'm not suggesting that. I'm asking the question.
No, sorry. I just mean to say that densification has effects other than just shadow, including access to public services like public schools and daycares and transit and those kinds of things that are the things that I'm really worried about, because height means more people. So more people means we need concomitant increases to the services in our neighborhood.
Okay, and I do thank you for raising the concerns about childcare. We were very fortunate in Vancouver that the province just announced a very significant investment, so it'll be helpful for us to share this feedback with staff that you definitely feel that you guys could be a potential location in this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, and that's it for questions. Thanks so much for coming in.
Have the petition.
Right, we'll have a clerk come and get the petition from you. Thank you so much. Point of information, sure, Councillor DeGenova.
Just because we've gone over this in other public hearings, I was hoping that through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps staff could give an opinion on whether or not it's appropriate for council members to ask about, other than this project, if you're not in support, what would you like to see on this land? Is that an okay question to ask? I wonder, because I would like to ask that, but I've been told no before.
Okay, I do think in the context of it was kind of leading to the moving to the speaker to clarify a point, so I thought it was fine in this case, but in other cases it can be way out, and so I think that it worked this time, but we can make sure that we have clarification for you next time around.
Thank you. That would be great.
Thank you. Great, and just before we continue with Ms. Werner, there was some question about the when we'd recommence this hearing. There was an email that was sent around, and I didn't realize this either, but I had read in my script when we would reconvene, and which was at when was it? Right. So we'd reconvene the standing committee at 3 on Thursday until 5, and then break for dinner until 6, and then reconvene in public hearing. So I've already read that out, and I've been told it's kind of unwise for us to change it. Of course, we could change it if we wanted to. We could, but we've already read that out to the public, so we should probably stick with that schedule that we have. Just to clarify, and we'll move on to Lynn Werner. Please go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name's Lynn Werner, and I'm co-owner with John Werner, who's speaker number 5, but has now chosen not to speak because he has hearing and health issues, as do I. And
Can I get you to speak just a little closer to the mic? Thank you very much.
My name is Lynn Werner. I reside at 676 East 22nd Avenue, which is right adjacent to this new proposed development. I share ownership with John Werner, and he is speaker number 5. Both of us have health issues of a different nature. He has now chosen not to speak. He has hearing issues. He's actually having quite a bit of difficulty understanding tonight. Okay. So I asked for an accommodation earlier, and with that accommodation, I believe it might be granted. I would probably be able to reduce our 5 minutes into possibly closer to 7, and apparently that might be possible, so he no longer has to speak.
Right. Well, let's see how you do, and then when we get closer
I'm ready
to 5.
To go. So we have the slideshow up there. And I also, does everyone have the handout I gave to everyone? Mm-hmm. Okay. I will not be going through the whole handout. That's why I've given it. I cannot cover anywhere near as many points that need to be covered. So rather than repeat what the people following me are going to be talking about, which are similar to what I believe it was Ms. Siegel just spoke about, I will not go over those matters, although I do attach, at about the halfway point, several letters of concern, which I've highlighted where they are. So here we start at the beginning. I live in Winston Gardens. That house is named after our cat. Our cat we brought from England in 1997. We had a difficult time finding accommodations where you could have a pet in Vancouver, and I think all renters will agree with that. In the end, we purchased a condo, lived in it less than 1 year, because we were fined $900 a month for having a 15-year-old cat. So we ended up saying if we had to pay $900 a month extra in fines for keeping our aged cat, we would basically stretch, and we stretched. We bought the smallest house in Vancouver, I believe. It's an 820 square foot finished space house. We bought it in 2002. We have worked for nearly 20 years, 60, 70, 80-hour weeks in our union jobs, both of us, to basically get ourselves to the point where we were literally 1 year away from potential retirement and also enjoyment in our residential neighborhood where all our neighbors are known and also our heights of the buildings. Can we go to the next slide? I don't know how to make the slides move. Is there a technique?
There we go. We're up there now, I think.
Okay. So this is our house. These gardens were established and planted by the original owner. The house has only ever been occupied by one other person, a woman who worked at Woodward's her entire career as a clerk. The house became hers in 1947. Unfortunately, through the death of her Navy fiancé, the house was already being built. She lived there alone till she passed away in 2002, and she successfully lived there on a wage, working at Woodward's as a woman on her own independently, and planted those beautiful gardens, which are adjacent to the proposed property. Next slide, please. This is actually from Google View. It actually represents better than the pictures that are represented in the Strand because they work to their advantage, not to our neighborhood's advantage. As you can see, my house happens to be 820 square foot. It's got a huge roof as it happens, because huge overhangs. They don't build like that nowadays because that gets considered as part of your FSR. So my house is in perfect condition, entirely small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, no basement suite, unfinished basement.
I don't want to hurry you along, but you're already at 3.
I know. So quickly, I just wanted to state, this is the last gardened original lot in the neighborhood, right adjacent to what will be not only, next slide, I don't know how to make the slides progress, a 71-foot height building. We're the last little house. Next slide, please. How close are we? We are very close. That, where you see that basketball court, is the property line where I understand the amenity entrance for the barbecues that will run 7 days a week and whatever outdoor amenities are being offered are going to be in that zone only. And the entrance to the garage, which will accommodate all the retail, all the commercial, and all the new residents, will be at the end of mine as well. I live in a 1-bedroom, which faces the east, so it's literally where that vine is and that little red tree. My window will be right beside a potentially 7-story, high-activity commercial trucks moving at great pace 7 days a week instead of the current 1 day a week for garbage trucks. Next slide, please. This is the amount of sunshine I get in my established gardens. Those wisteria vines are 7 years old. They don't even sell that type of wisteria anymore. The whole plantings of that garden are there, and they get light. Next slide, please. As you can see, I get morning light. Morning light will disappear. Next slide, please. I get a lot of morning light. That is summer morning light. You can do all the shadow studies that you want, but I tell you, when that building, next slide, when that building arises, it'll be twice the height of that hydro pole. That is the view of those current existing duplexes right overlooking my garden. Twice the height. That is my bedroom, which is single pane windows, which is actually 20 feet away, not 80 feet away for privacy and protection that the last agenda thing was talking about. It is 20 feet away from barbecue areas.
Can I just stop you there because we're at 5 minutes?
Yep.
And council heard the explanation earlier about, is it okay if we just extend for another 2 minutes to hear the rest of this? Is there people all right? Any objections to that? No. Okay, so we'll give you a couple more minutes.
Okay, next slide. These are the sort of people who use these. You know why they walk down this mother and her 2 children every single day to who I take at her daycare? She walks down the alleys because it's too noisy to walk down Fraser. Our people use these alleys, and yet the only entrance and exit for all the commercial vehicles, which will run 7 days a week, including all the residents, will be via ours because East 23rd is too narrow, currently cannot. Next slide, please. Oh, by the way, we have other neighbors too, and other neighbors who can't afford any rent at any point. That was taken last week. Next slide. 25-foot high poodle on a stick. Think triple, because that would be the height of this block proposal. Next slide, please. We actually have my bedroom, my living room, kitchen are literally 23 to 24 feet away from all the shared amenities, which will be 7 days a week till we be at 10 or 11. And all the entrances will have to enter and exit through ours because it doesn't show in a topographical diagram, but that hotspot is, these are hotspots I consider, because that alley is so steep that it's impassable pretty well from about October till about March because of frost. as is our street, 23rd. So every truck that comes in and out at the moment to the entire area never passes onto 23rd. It goes up the alley, turns at outside my kitchen, has to actually then proceed onto 23rd, reverse with the beep, 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 beep. But that'll be a 7-fold increase when we have commercial and that density of car movement. Next slide, please.
Well, actually,
Next slide.
we're at the 7 minutes
I'll
now.
just get to the last slide then. Can I just one more. That's it.
Okay.
Stop. This is no, one back. This is actually the president of Strand, and this is how he feels. The previous slide said more. This is what I would just like to leave you with. I'll leave you this as a thought. There are no CACs being required. This is a 7-story rezoning from 2 stories. The shadowing, the privacy, there's too many issues to discuss. That is why I've made this package. I have health issues. I haven't worked in 15 months. So I've had a lot of time to spend in my garden and overlooking and getting to know my neighbors better because of health issues. And I got to say, if they want to do, if so much is given to Strand, that $10 billion development, private family, I hope much will be required, particularly in the form of CACs and other things. That's what
Thank you very much for coming in tonight. You don't have any questions, but appreciate your presentation. John Werner? Oh, he's not speaking. Okay, thanks very much. Daniel Oleksiuk. There we go. Thanks for coming in. Up to 5 minutes, please.
All right, thanks for hearing from me tonight, Mayor and Council. My name is Daniel Oleksiuk. I'm a member of Abundant Housing Vancouver, and I was on the city's Renters Advisory Committee from when it began until just recently. I'm here to ask you to protect the character of this neighborhood by approving this project. In doing so, I hope that you'll take a regional view of the project. Now, I love this neighborhood. I actually went to Charles Dickens Elementary for 8 years. Class of 1997. I think we also have classes of 1996 and 1999 represented here. And now one of my oldest, closest friends is actually going to that school, to the rebuilt school. So I was just reflecting on what's changed. And I realized that when I went to Dickens, it was a working class neighborhood full of immigrants from all over the world. And that was a really wonderful way to grow up. But I have trouble, of course, as you all do, picturing those same working class families moving here and buying one of the single family homes in the neighborhood. And I think that change has come at a huge loss for this community's character. Riley Park and Cedar Cottage have gone from being open, welcoming, affordable neighborhoods to increasingly being defined by exclusion, incumbency, and land wealth. Some of the people against this project are not seeking not to preserve that inclusive character that it once had, but they're seeking to destroy that character through exclusion. Now, I'd like to comment on the pace of change and regional sprawl for a moment. Instead of welcoming new people to these neighborhoods, we're sending them further and further into the suburbs. Since 1981, the last census before I was born, Riley Park has added 3,000 residents, an increase of 24%. Meanwhile, the city of Vancouver has added 50%, including me. The region has added 110%. It's been uneven, though. Surrey grew by 350%, Abbotsford by over 1,000%. The opposition to this project would have you to continue this trend of sprawl and displacement. A few examples from the comments. Density is not the be-all and end-all solution. The cost to existing citizens is too high. We have been soiling our own nest. Nothing higher than 3 stories is our request as native Vancouverites who lament the degradation of our once fine city. Another one. I support the building of affordable housing, but I don't think it should destroy a lively community in the process. Adding so much density so quickly will overwhelm us. Another one said it is an affront to the neighborhood. It goes on like this. You go through the comments. Soiling our nest, degradation, destroy, overwhelm, proliferation, affront. Tonight we heard new residents and renters described as a burden. And of course, parking, always parking. So the apartment ban wasn't put in place to protect affordability, and it isn't in place today to create it. It's always been and is still about exclusion. For those who believe the neighborhood will otherwise be affordable, I'd ask you to look at what basement suites currently cost in the area. I've spoken today a bit about new people coming to the area, but I also think that I'd also like to talk about people like me from Dickens and after, from 1997 and after, who didn't get into a detached home when they were still affordable and likely never will. We need somewhere to go. And we're going to go where the new housing gets built. If we continue to build the housing and the amenities in Abbotsford, in Surrey, and not in Vancouver, that's where people are going to go. We're going to have longer commutes, we're going to have more greenhouse gas emissions, and people are going to be separated from jobs and families because our current plan is a plan for regional sprawl because we're not building near the city centre. For the comment that we need amenities, we need more schools in the neighbourhood, that's a great argument for more schools. It's a terrible argument against more housing. Failing to build housing is not an amenity policy. It's just another excuse in the long tradition of exclusion. Now, I do have some suggestions for improvement of this project. We've declared a climate emergency, so I don't see how that's compatible with continuing to require automatic car storage in all of these projects. This is fossil fuel infrastructure, and it's not in keeping with other motions that this council has put out. Every penny that goes to subsidize car parking should instead be going to subsidize housing for human beings. I'd also note this project's located on a polluted arterial roadway. This creates foreseeable harm to residents, and it privileges people who don't want to live near apartment buildings over the health of other residents who have to breathe in the air on those arterials. So I think what this project means to me is it's a choice between continuing the trend of sprawl, longer commutes, and more greenhouse gas emissions that has been our plan, or starting to allow at least 4 floors and corner stores throughout the city, having more walkable neighborhoods, and having more housing near where people actually want to live. So thank you for hearing from me tonight.
Great, thanks very much. 5 minutes on the dot. You have Councillor Fry ask you a question.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Alexiak. Interesting, you mentioned 4 floors and corner stores. So what does 7 floors mean? Or 6 floors, sorry.
Yeah, so it's at least 4 floors and corner stores. I live on the 10th floor, so it would be, I think, at least hypocritical for me to want less than that. Okay. But yeah, at least 4. I don't think 4 floors and corner stores is inappropriate really anywhere.
So, and I appreciate your comment about parking, and I agree with you. I don't think, as we learned recently, we can necessarily modify that on the fly. What do you think about the public benefit strategy with this particular project? I mean, you mentioned that the school argument and the public benefits, but that being said, that we do have to pay for increased infrastructure needs as we add density, and that's just a given, and that somebody has to pay for it at some point. And how do you propose that we otherwise pay for those kind of density requirements?
I mean, on the parking, I guess I'd say that's basically a benefit that we are currently requiring. It goes into the pro forma like anything else, and it could go to housing, schools, or anything else. As for how to pay for schools, I mean, if kids need schools, we should build schools, and we should fund it. I just don't see how that's an argument against housing.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and that's it for questions.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
I have one.
Oh, sorry.
All right.
Councillor Dejanova.
I was trying to figure out how much of this type of housing was vacant in the neighborhood right now. So I understand that with lower vacancy rates, it can drive prices up. I'm going to ask our staff this, but you've spoken about this before on adding supply. Do you have any thoughts on adding supply as we continue along, because every old home was once new, and if we don't keep that happening on the continuum of housing, then we're going to have really old stock and really new stock, but maybe a big missing amount in the middle, which isn't quite the same as the missing middle. But to your comments, the people who grew up in Vancouver, and it was one of the reasons that inspired me. I mean, you've been here before, to run for council. So in asking that question, I mean, do you think that this will make an impact in the neighborhood to people like you who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to live in the city if you didn't have market rental?
I mean, it will certainly make an impact at least to the 121 units of people, maybe some 200 people who get to live there. We don't know who they are today, but I think they'll be glad that their homes are built. As for the vacancy rate, I thought that Alex made a really good comparison earlier. He said, I think the city broadly understands really well if you take, say, an Airbnb suite, you return that to the rental market, that's a good thing. I don't think that's so different from building a new rental suite. And I think it's a really similar argument. And they both do help.
Okay, thank you. I had one more question here. Regarding some of the comments that have been made and questions about schools, or not the school board, just like I was elected to the park board, I know that that's not my role or capacity here, but the school board does have assets. They do have land, and they work with the provincial government. And as the provincial government thankfully puts money into childcare and into other, hopefully will continue to do so, they're also looking at schools. Would you suggest that council that this is significant enough that we should be moving forward and asking the school board to consult on all matters in this neighborhood? Do you have any opinion on that? I know you've spoken before about working with different levels of government. That's why I'm asking you this question.
I mean, it takes a long time to build schools and a long time to build housing, so I think you should be working together. I'd also say from the provincial level, wherever the kids live, they're going to need a school. If you build the housing in Surrey, they'll need a school in Surrey. If you build the housing in Vancouver, they'll need schools in Vancouver. Moving the housing from one place to another doesn't mean the kid doesn't exist. They're going to need schools wherever they are.
Okay, and then to the question, sorry, I was looking at the writing I had here on a comment that was made about building market rental and giving applicants a break is what it was called, but a waiver of DCLs or CACs to build that. Do you think that without these types of incentives, we might just see condos?
I think that's what we did see when we didn't have these programs before about 2010. Almost only condos were built.
Thanks so much for answering my questions.
Put my mic on there. That's it for questions. Thanks for coming in. We've got Nick Caligaros. Thanks. And followed by Don Davies. And maybe we'll get in Eileen Rawling and Lucas Berube, who's the 10th speaker. So go ahead, Mr. Caligaros.
Hi, my name is Nick Caligaros, and I'm in favor of the project. I do feel for the people that have spoken against and for and how passionate they are. And I just want to say a little bit more about the area. I was born in the area. I was raised in the area. I've raised my children there. I work there. So I've seen all the changes. I'm also a landlord. And the only way to deal with a lot of, we're talking about affordability and all the housing and stuff like that. I have people that come to my building and I've got to say no to 20 people and try to pick one. And that is a difficult thing for me to do. One of my tenants, who's been with me for a decade, she's maxed out. She's a single mom, she's maxed out, and she pays probably about $1,000 below market. And the reason we haven't done that is because she is diligently trying to find somewhere to go, and she can't. So we're like, okay, we understand that. And she does all the extras. The favorite thing she does is she brings cookies to my kids at Christmas. So the supply is so low. And I hear a lot about, and I sympathize, just not in my neighborhood, just not where I live, just not where I shop, or just not where I walk. And I get it, I feel the same way. But if we look at a larger picture, it has to be in our neighborhood. It has to be where we shop. It has to be where we walk. And we all have to take an ownership. Now, my other rents are similar to what have been described. They're not. It's not a brand new unit. But nobody comes to me and says, I can't afford rent. There's 20 people there, and I've got to say no. So the easiest way is that old saying of supply and demand. We don't need one project. We need 20 projects plus throughout the city. This happens to be in a Fraser area. And, I went to Livingston. I went to Tupper. My kids are there. We're talking how the elementary schools are maxed. I think Tupper, and I'm sure those kids also have parents, that's only at about 60% capacity. So there's substantial room for, grade 8 to 12. And families, of course, are going to occupy that. A couple of days a week. We call it the dads group. The dads get together, a couple of us, and sometimes it's 2, 3, whatever, excuse me, and we go for a walk in the neighborhood. And our usual route is down St. George, and we'll go probably down to 37th and down Main. We'll stop at Marche, one of the local coffee shops. So one time we're like, hey, let's change it up, go up Fraser. And I saw this development, and I'm like, it's exactly what we need. And it reminded me of the building on 18th and Main. Now that's all condos, but that little front area on 18th and Main, first of all, it's a great looking building. It attracts a lot of attention. But that little area should have been, like a restaurant or a coffee shop. I had a friend visiting from Europe and said, why didn't they have a restaurant here or a coffee shop to sit out in the green space? Then I hear they've got doors opening up to allow that inside, outside. I think that's a great idea. And I think that's what brings community together. I mean, there's been a couple of mentions about big box. Well, 3 blocks away, you have No Frills, you have Starbucks, you have Shoppers Drug Mart. They're probably not going to come there for competition. But again, Shoppers Drug Mart, No Frills are valuable assets when you're walking to get your groceries. And I've seen the change. I mean, back in the day when I grew up, you couldn't give a lease spot away on Main Street. Well, Main is huge, and it's where Fraser's going, and it's where Fraser needs to be also. So when the dads and I were walking, I mean, I've volunteered at Tupper. I've coached several sports there. And even though my kids have graduated, I'm still heavily involved in fundraising and supporting any kid that needs it. And the teachers know that, and the support staff, and they'll just say, hey, this person could use a hand. And I go out and I talk to some friends in the neighborhood that I know that can do it. So one day the dads and I were talking. They say, oh, did you see the gym? All the kids were in there, the fitness center at Tupper. I said, that equipment was 20 years old when I was there. I said, that's our next fundraiser. Because most of our fundraiser is for the Best Buddies program.
And we're just at 5 minutes, so if you want to...
Yeah, 20 seconds. So we were talking about doing this fitness room because the kids use it. Even the kids with special needs are in there, the teachers, everything. And that was our goal. We are going to, over the next 5 years, we're going to try to redo that for the school.
Awesome.
2 months later, I get an email from the vice principal saying, we just got a donation for the fitness room. I'm like, oh, that's awesome, incredible. And that donation came from Strand without any bit of publicity, without any bit of, hey, how can we get this back? And I mean, I don't know if I'm entitled to disclose it, but it was a large enough contribution that we are going to have a new fitness center.
And thank you. We're well over time, but thanks for coming in and sharing your stories.
Thank you.
Next, we have Don Davies. And should I say Member of Parliament, Don Davies? Nice to have you in today, Don.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I'm the Member of Parliament for Vancouver Kingsway, in which the current application and a large part of Fraser Street are situated. But more importantly, I am a neighbour. My family and I live at 904 East 23rd Avenue, and we've lived in the Fraserhood for 20 years. I speak for myself, but I think I also speak for many of my constituents. Last November, I held a town hall on Fraser Corridor development. The genesis was the extensive proliferation of land assemblies and development applications along Fraser Street. We had one of the largest turnouts we've ever had, about 150 people, including Councillor Wiebe. Thanks for coming. And after our town hall, we received many requests for follow-up action. So we formed the Fraser Street Neighbourhood Coalition. We established a listserv to connect local residents. We adopted a set of guiding principles, and we circulated a petition that now has over 500 signatures from folks in our community gathered effectively in the last month alone. And what are the results of these 7 months of meetings and discussions? Well, let me tell you what our neighborhood is for. We are for development along Fraser Corridor, but we want thoughtful, comprehensive development, not one-off spot zoning. We are for densification of single-family neighborhoods, including duplexes, fourplexes, infill homes, laneways, townhouses, cottage clusters, 3 to 4 story rental apartment buildings, modular housing, and cooperatives. This is, by the way, precisely the development contained in the present KCC community plan that's 20 years old and also supported by 71% in a recent research company poll conducted by Mario Canseco. We are for affordable housing and affordable premises for independent small businesses. We are for the full spectrum of rental stock, social to undermarket to market. We are for development that is neighborhood appropriate and has community support, that allows folks on the east side to be able to live and work in the community they work and grew up in. We are for development that ensures densification is accompanied by services, including transit, green space, childcare, school space, arts, and recreation. What we are not is NIMBY, anti-development, or anti-market. Now, the context in which the current application is situated is important. The Fraser neighborhood is a low to moderate income neighborhood. The median family income is $73,000, not individual income, family income. There are many tenanted multifamily properties, many providing affordable rents, and many at risk of being dislodged. We are ethnically diverse. We have mostly independent small businesses of all types. Fraser is a secondary artery. It's quite narrow and there's no central boulevard. Topographically, it starts low at Kingsway and it rises as it approaches 25th. It levels off, then rises again as it approaches 41st. It sits on a ridgeway, which means it slopes down significantly on both sides. It is not on or near a SkyTrain or a particularly well-served transit line or hub. We border Kingsway, which is gaining many high-rise and much density. There is rapid land assembly along Knight Street and King Edward Avenue, creating a triangle of development. There are 11 development projects in some form of progress in a 9-block stretch of Fraser, from 16th to 25th. Every single one is proposed to be 6 to 7 stories high. All are market rental, except for one, the 411 site, and that's a specific site for seniors, and not particularly affordable, by the way, at 80% of market. So outside of 411, of the remaining 10 projects, there's not a single unit of affordable housing being proposed. All of these developments propose commercial ground floor space that will be unaffordable for independent small business that currently exists. So we're talking about creating a tunnel of 6 to 7 story buildings on both sides of the street, way too high, out of scope of the neighborhood, and even more hulking on the neighborhood sides that slope away and 100% market rent. Now, to speak to the current development proposals, including the development at hand, it ignores the KCC community plan and it prejudges the citywide plan, which, by the way, I think is a good idea. This is premature and it violates all notions of community input and sound planning. It contradicts the wishes of 71% of Vancouverites being neither neighborhood appropriate nor enjoying community support of the residents of Fraser Street community. Again, it does not contain one single unit of affordable housing for our community members. $2,000 for a one-bedroom, to have to make $75,000 for a one-bedroom apartment does not provide rental housing for people that live in my community. That is not inclusive. It has 10,000 square feet of commercial space at market price. That's completely out of character with the Fraser Street business environment, and I can guarantee you will provide no affordable rental space for the existing small businesses. It's too high, it's too large, it's in the wrong place for a 72-foot, 7-story building because it sits at the very crest of Fraser Street at the top of the ridgeline, looming far out of scale of the neighborhood. 20 seconds. The no CAC, the neighborhood gets the density, but no amenities. That's just wrong, unless City Council is going to guarantee that the $2 million is going to go to the Fraser Hood. You make that commitment and I'll withdraw that statement. So finally, this development should be turned down, or at the very least shaped. It should be 4 to 5 stories at the tallest. It should have at least some units of affordable rental, maybe under the MERB program, and it should pay the CAC so the community gets some benefit from the density. Again, we want development, but we want it thoughtful and comprehensive for the whole corridor.
Thanks very much. And you have some questions here, Don? Councillor Dejanova.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Mr. Davies, are you here in your capacity as a private resident citizen or in your capacity in another capacity? I just didn't know because of the introduction, but usually we would have a separate section sometimes. I just wanted to make sure that it was noted for the record? Are you speaking on behalf of yourself or on behalf of your constituency?
Well, thank you for the question. I think at the beginning I made it, I tried to make it clear. I'm wearing a number of hats. I'm a neighbor. I live 2 blocks from the development. I'm, as the MP for the area, I do listen to all my constituents and have conducted the town halls and meetings. And I'm also a founding member of the Fraser Street Neighborhood Coalition, which is a group of neighborhood folks who've come together to help shape the community voice.
Thank you very much. So that's good to know. So then I will ask you, your constituents, I mean, is there a certain percentage that you've heard from, particularly on this project? And have you opened it up to asking them their opinion? And can you tell me kind of what you've received back in that capacity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the town hall, I mailed every resident between Knight Street and Main Street from Kingsway to 41st and invited them to the town hall. At that town hall, we had, as I said, at least 150 people that came. From that, we developed a listserv that has now grown. I think at last check, we had over 250 families on the listserv. And then we have gone door to door in the community. You know, the petition where we got 530 signatures, that's not an AstroTurf. I've seen some really, really great websites that you can get petitions on. This was got by going door to door and talking to neighbors and going to community events. So I would say I've probably spoken to maybe close to 1,000 people in my neighborhood about this development. So that's what informs my views.
Okay, thank you. Have you inputted, sent correspondence to our staff at all, or come to speak? I can't recall you speaking last term on policies that the criteria that this project meets, and that's why staff are recommending them. So I'm just wondering if you're talking about comprehensive planning, and I have a background in nonprofit housing, so I'm just wondering, have you thought about digging into the policies that might prevent this, and have you inputted on them at all?
Yes, I have. I mean, I, like many people along Fraser, this first came to our attention when we saw just a lot of land assembly up Fraser. And I'm not generally involved in municipal issues as a federal politician, but I believe that housing is all levels of government's responsibility, particularly the federal government's. And so when I decided to have the town hall to seek input, it was informed that way. What I've come to believe now is that the spot zoning, like we're doing here tonight, is, frankly, I think it's inappropriate now, because it's hard to evaluate this particular project without knowing what's across the street or what's beside it. And that's why I'm here to tell you, in that 9-block area, how would it help you make your decision if you knew there were 11 6-story buildings going in, all market rental? That would be different. So that's why I would like, I'm a big fan, by the way, of your citywide plan. Yeah. I love that idea. And
Sorry, I only have 5 minutes, and I do have another question for you. I was about the citywide plan, actually. But in looking at the type of housing that I've been very supportive of building, I mean, across the board, and I can tell you it's hard. Like, I've had to find housing for people at $375 a month. It's really hard to do in the city. But to the mayor's point about building housing for the workforce and making sure that they have a place in Vancouver, because they'll just, as I'm sure hearing from your constituency, they'll move farther and farther out, and they won't want to, take transit in. So this, I understand from our staff, ticks all of those boxes. So do you feel that there's enough of this type of housing in your neighborhood? And until we complete the citywide plan, what do you suggest we do to build that housing? I mean, just put a moratorium on all housing in the city of Vancouver? I can't really see that happening, but I'm wondering what your solution might be there.
Well, you know what it appears to me is that this project neither conforms to the present community plan, and it anticipates the upcoming citywide plan. And I think Fraser Street is a perfect opportunity for council to sort of say, what do we envision for, let's say, a 30-block part of Fraser? I could see a continuum of, townhouse to 2, 3, 4, even 5, 6-story buildings as it follows the topography. I would like to see a co-op. I'd like to see every 3 or 4 blocks a little bit of green space, So there's a little urban park. I'd like to see planning for daycare space. I can tell you that all the schools, like I said, are stuffed. So that has to be taken into account. And I want to see space for independent small business. So I can only see that happening under a comprehensive plan. So that's what I'd like to see. And to speak to the point where this development is not going to provide a unit for a single person that I know that lives in Fraser. Not a $2 grand to one bedroom.
Microphone and thank you.
We're well over the time here, and I just want to let council know that we're at 4 minutes to 10. By law, we're done at 10 o'clock. So we have two more questioners on the list, Councillor Dominato and Councillor Swanson.
Mayor, I could come back on Thursday too, if that.
I think we could probably squeeze in those two questions if we extended for.
I would just want to extend
10 minutes.
Complete
just to complete
this
this.
speaker.
Sure. Okay.
May I move a motion?
Sure. Can we have a motion?
Sorry, I was trying to.
Right. Can we have a motion then to extend to just finish off the questions for MP Davies, and then that would be it for this evening, and then we'd be back at 6 p.m. on Thursday. So, got a seconder for that? Councillor Boyle, all in favor of extending this for the next two questions? Thank you very much. Okay, so Councillor Dominato? Sure. Go ahead, Councillor Dominato.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, MP Davies, for being here. Just a couple of quick questions. We've only heard from a few residents so far, but a couple have raised the issue of around school capacity, and I'm just wondering, have you sat down to meet with the entire school board to raise those concerns with the board or the superintendent?
No, I haven't.
Okay. And then you had mentioned just around the DCLs and whether that money would stay within the neighborhood or community. And I've sent in a question to staff about how that works. But you mentioned in your comments that this isn't the right place for this type of housing, this type of building. So what would be the right place from your perspective?
I would say at the foot of Fraser. So if you stood with me at the foot of Fraser and Kingsway, and I encourage all of you to come walk the Fraser, I've learned a lot just walking it. It goes up quite significantly. So I think a thoughtful plan would say, let's put the 6 or 7 story buildings at the foot of Fraser before it rises, not at the crest of the hill. And by the way, at the crest, right where this strand development is, that's where the Ridgeway, I think this was a train at one point, track, it really dropped away dramatically. So when you think of 3 telephone poles on the front of Fraser, it really drops back. I have to tell you, I was turned down for a deck in my backyard because of concerns that I could look into my neighbor's backyard. And this, we're putting hulking buildings there that are just going to tower over the residential neighbor houses right behind them. Never mind shade, but lack of privacy. So I just think there's a better, smarter place to put the buildings. So I think there's a place for this kind of development, but not right there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I just have one question. What do you say to the folks who have been here tonight who say, we love this development, we can move in, the rents don't bother us, we need more rental even if it is expensive? What do you say to them?
I'm somewhat sympathetic because I do think there's a place for market rental. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think there's a much greater need for affordable rental. And that's what I'd like to see. I have to tell you, in 12 years of watching politics, everybody's in favor of affordable housing. But there's always a reason why we just can't build it right now. It's always the next project. So as a community, I can tell you from the Fraserhood, we want development, but we want a place for our kids and our neighbors to live. One of the previous speakers talked about inclusiveness. We are all about inclusiveness. We're here to demand inclusiveness for people who live in the Fraserhood and who reflects the real socioeconomic realities of the immigrants, of the racialized communities. These are the people that don't get housing, and they're not moving into a place for $2,000 for 1 bedroom or $3,300 for a 3-bedroom, where the combined family income would have to be $120,000 or whatever. So I think there is a place for market rental. I would love to see a MURB on this site. I could even probably tolerate 5 or 6 stories if it did have some affordable housing in it. But when there's not one unit of it, we get extra density, no affordability. How does that reflect the community's needs? I can tell you in Vancouver Kingsway and along Fraser Hood, it does not. It's gentrification, and this is not inclusive. This is an exclusive development.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks, and that's all the questions. Thanks for coming in tonight for everybody else. And we'll be, again, reconvening this hearing on Thursday, the 11th at 6 p.m., starting with Eileen Rawling and then Lucas Berube as the next two speakers. Thank you. Right, and just to remind council not to speak to anyone involved in the application until we've made our decision. And could I have a motion to recess? Councillor DeGenova, Councillor Carr, no, Councillor Boyle seconds. And all in favor of recessing? Okay, thank you very much. That's passed.